Artie.
They were.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the July 5th City Council meeting commencing at 6:16 p.m. May we have a roll call, please?
Council members Manukian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Quintero,
Here.
Yusefian,
Here.
Mayor Weaver.
Here. And let's see. You three folks? Called in before I got ready. The flag salute tonight will be by Councilman Member Yusefian and invocation by City Clerk Artie Kasaki. Please stand.
As you know, yesterday was 4th of July, and I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to watch a special program on CNN on what is happening in North Korea. And if you watched it, you would have noticed why this is one of the greatest countries in the world. They showed if you spoke on cell phone, you were executed. If you watched European movies, you were executed. So we sometimes live in this country and do not understand the liberties that we have and don't appreciate them until something like that happens and you look at it and then you go, thank God I live in this country. That's why we give the pledge to our great nation. Follow after me. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
According to Thomas Jefferson, one of our greatest leaders and founding fathers, honesty is the first chapter in the Book of Wisdom. As we deliberate and discuss the important issues before this body this evening, let us do so with purity of thought and action. Guide the intentions of this council with integrity and honesty. May subsequent generations look upon our actions tonight in hindsight and remark that they were honest and wise decisions. Amen.
Thank you. May we have your report?
The agenda for the July 5th, 2006 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, June 29th, 2006 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And what is next?
Next is agenda preview for the meeting of July 11, 2006.
Mr. McFall.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
You too.
You caught me quickly. Mr. Mayor, members of council, on the agenda preview for July 11th, on the Glendale Housing Authority, the Director of Community Development will be providing a report on the development of affordable family rental project at 328 Miraloma Avenue with Miraloma, which is a California limited partnership. The redevelopment agency has one action item. It'll be a report regarding a filed mitigated negative declaration and combined design stages 1 and 2 for a proposed 47-unit residential condominium project located at 1838 South Brand Boulevard. There will be a joint meeting of the City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency with the report from the Director of Development Services on ABC 7 owner participation agreement. There will also be a joint meeting of the City Council and the Glendale Housing Authority from the Director of Planning and Community Development Housing, a continuation from June 6 regarding the standards for condominium conversions. The City Council agenda has a number of items. The first is a number of ordinances will be adopted from anticipated actions the week before, most of these dealing with the budget and salary and compensation. There are a few action items. The Director of Parks and Recreation will be providing and maybe, this actually may go the following week, but maybe providing a report on design services for Maple Park. They said that might be this week or next week. It could be, probably in fact will be the following week. There will also be a report from the Director of Administrative Services regarding modifying the formal bid limit. This is a follow-up to charter amendments that took place. The Director of Public Works will be submitting a report on experimental signage intended to reduce the use of engine brakes on the I-210 freeway at Lowell Avenue. and a report from the Director of Public Works regarding the annual special assessment on Brand Boulevard. Finally, there will be a hearing from the City Attorney and the Director of Planning regarding rezoning from R1 to R1 to C3 for the property located at 702 East Glen Oaks Boulevard. There'll be a couple of actions for Council to consider, either continuing the matter or taking the matter up that evening. That's it.
Thank you. And what is next?
Next is at 3B, Mayor Armen Karapetyan from Glendale sister city, Rapan, Armenia.
I think I'll turn to Artin Manukian. I guess I won't. She doesn't look like Artin.
Thank goodness.
Lena, welcome.
Hi, my name is Alina Azizian. I'm with the Armenian National Committee in Glendale. In 2002, the ANC began initiating the Sister City program with the city of Rapan in Armenia. And in December of 2002, the City Council unanimously supported the formation of the Sister City. Subsequently, the Sister City program became its own organization, and they've been doing lots of great things. In 2003, we sent a delegation to visit Rapan to learn more about our sister city. This year, we were very fortunate to have the mayor of Rapan come visit us. I believe he's here for about 10 days, and it's been fantastic to have him here. I believe this is a great step for fostering the relations between the two cities. I think there's so much that they can learn from us and after what we took from them when we were there. And I hope that this relationship continues to grow. I hope that we can do a lot more in the future and collaborate on a lot of efforts. I think it can be beneficial to both cities and very productive. I wanted to also take a moment to really thank the city staff who helped put together a wonderful tour of City Hall, the police departments, the fire departments. We got to see a lot. The mayor of Rapan had a helicopter ride. He got to go on one of the fire trucks. And it's been really exciting. I accompanied him on a lot of it, and I myself learned a lot. Very informative, and I thank every member of the city who participated in that, who took time out of their day to meet with us, to answer questions about everything from recycling to energy and everything else. It's really been a great visit. Next, I'd like to invite Ani Cherchan to say a few words.
Hello, my name is Ani Cherchan. I represent the Glendale Rapan Sister City Association. Dear Mayor and members of City Council, the Glendale Rapan Sister City Association has been working very diligently on several projects since its formation in 2002, after a resolution passed by the City Council officially recognized Rapan as our sister city. An official delegation visited the city of Rapan in 2003, and we are honored to receive the mayor of Rapan for his reciprocal visit. We would like to thank the city of Glendale for its warm reception and hospitality. The city staff members have been very welcoming and helpful in showing our guests all the great facets of Glendale. Mr. Karapetyan is very impressed by all that he has seen, both on the ground and from his helicopter ride with the Glendale Police Department. Most notably, Mr. Karapetyan is impressed that every city department has had at least one Armenian-speaking employee. We are certain that this visit will strengthen ties between the two cities and lead to several future meaningful endeavors. Now I'd like to provide you with a brief introduction of Mayor of Rapan. Mr. Armen Karapetyan was born in Rapan. Shortly after graduation from high school in 1971, he served in the Soviet Army from 1973 to 1975. In 1980, Mr. Karapetyan graduated from Yerevan's Polytechnic Institute with a degree in electrical engineering. As one who possesses unique organizational and leadership skills, Mr. Karapetyan was first elected as mayor of Rapan in 2002 and re-elected in 2005. In his work, he has always surrounded himself with highly educated individuals with high morals who assist him to enhance the quality of life for people of Rapan. Mr. Karapetyan is serving his term as mayor until October of 2008. Now, Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you.
Մեծարգո քաղաքապետ, քաղաքապետարանի հարգարժան անդամներ, պարոն կառավարիչ։
Respectable Mayor, City Council members, and City Clerk.
Նախ թույլ տվեք ձեր բոլորին շնորհավորել անկախության օրվա առթիվ։
Please allow me to congratulate you on the celebration of your independence.
Անհուն գոհնակությամբ ներկայացել եմ Կապանի քաղաքապետարանի աշխատակազմի եւ քաղաքի ողջ բնակչության կողմից ձեզ ջեր ողջույններ եղղելու համար։
It is with immense pleasure that I stand here before you as a representative of Rapan, its people, and its government to extend my warmest welcomes.
2003 թվականի ձեր այցելությունը լավ տպավորություն թողեց եւ վստահ եմ պատե առիթ եղավ ձեզ համար ծանոթանալու մեր քաղաքին եւ մեր հասարակության կյանքին։
I am positive that your visit in 2003 left great impressions and gave you an opportunity to familiarize yourselves with our city and our daily lives.
Այսօր պատիվ ունեմ փոխադարձելու այդ այցելությունը, որը նպատակ ունի ավելի խորացնելու փոխհարաբերությունները մեր քաղաքների միջև։
Today, I have the gratification of returning the visit, in which I hope to deepen ties between our sister city of Glendale. I have also had a chance to familiarize myself with the city's self-governing arrangement, the different city departments, and the structure of businesses.
Եվ միևնույն ժամանակ ծանոթանալու մեր քույր Գլենդելի քաղաքապետարանի կառուցվածքին, տեղական ինքնակառավարման օրենքին, քաղաքապետարանի բաժիններին։ Ինչպես նաև նրանց կողմից իրականացող գործառույթների կազմակերպման եւ իրականացման հետ։ Շնորհակալություն եմ հայտնում ձեզ եւ բոլոր կազմակերպությունների եւ անհատներին այս վերջին տարիներին նրանց կողմից ցուցաբերված աջակցությունների համար։
I would like to thank you and all the organizations and individuals who have extended their interests and help in the past several years.
Տեղին է, որ ես հստակ շնորհակալություն հայտնեմ նաև Գլենդելի քաղաքապետարին, նրա ղեկավարությանը եւ մասնավորապես Հրշեջ Կայանին Կապան քաղաքի շտապօգնության մեքենա նվիրելու համար։
It is necessary that I extend a specific thanks to the City of Glendale and the City Council, especially the Glendale Fire Department, for the gift of an emergency vehicle to the City of Rapan.
Երախտագիտության խոսքեր չեմ գտնում արտահայտելու համար, զգացմունքներս այսքան ջերմ ընդունելության արժանանալու համար։
I cannot find the words to express my feelings for the warm reception I have received.
Ցանկանում եմ մեկ անգամ եւս իմ խորին շնորհակալությունները հայտնել քաղաքապետարանի բոլոր բաժինների աշխատակիցներին, իրենց բաժինների կողմից իրականացող աշխատանքներին սիրահոժար ձերով ծանոթանալու համար։
I would like to offer my deepest gratitude again to all the employees of the departments of the City of Glendale for introducing me to the way they work.
Ես դա համարում եմ բացառիկ վերաբերմունք ոչ թե անհատապես ինձ, այլ Կապան քաղաքի ողջ բնակչության հանդեպ։
I revere that as exceptional treatment not only towards me as an individual, but towards the city of Rapan and all its citizens.
Եվ այստեղ ուզում եմ Կապանի ժողովրդի կողմից իմ երախտագիտությունս հայտնել ձեզ եւ շնորհավորել ձեզ ձեր քաղաքի հիմնադրման 100-ամյակի առթիվ, ցանկանալ քաղաքին եւ բնակիչներին ավելի բարձր նվաճումներ եւ հաջողություններ։
I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the City of Glendale on its centennial anniversary from the people of Rapan and wish Glendale and its citizens higher goals and future successes.
Իսրտե ընդունեք այս համեստ նվերը մեր կողմից քաղաքին։
Please accept this humble gift from the bottom of our hearts.
Թող այս նվերը խորհրդանի հանդիսանա մեր երկու քաղաքների հետագա համագործակցության համար։ Շնորհակալություն ձեզ։
Let this gift serve as a symbol of future endeavors between the two cities. Thank you.
Get a close up on that? But they can zoom in. Zoom on any of them? Guess they can't. They'll show the audience at least.
And what that is an obsidian model of the Church of Echmiadzin in Yerevan,
The Mother Church.
the mother church of.
Mr. Mayor, it's an honor having you here, and I want to present this to you, but I just wanted to state, you have to translate. Don't speak Armenian. I'd just like to say I learned something that we're both mayors and we're both engineers. I'm a civil engineer. I'm not supposed to talk about that around here. But I am.
They're very intelligent people to govern the city.
You hear that?
He is a politician, isn't he?
Also, I tell him that isn't it nice that he showed up with our unusual weather for the last week or so, this very hot period that we usually don't have now.
Վաղտը բելա որ անեն արիջը գոհի հոստեղիոթը շատ տական թանապես այդքան տակ չի ստեղ։
Ես եմ բերել դա այդ տաքությունը։
I brought the heat with me.
When do you leave?
Թողնես հետո գնամ տաքությունը, չեմ տալի հետս։
I'll leave the heat with me when I leave.
Thank you, but no thanks. But let me read this and then you can translate it. It's to you. In recognition of your outstanding leadership and exemplary dedication working on culture exchange and exchanging friendship with the city of Glendale.
Ձեր անվան համար իբրև քաղաքապետ, ձեր աշխատանքի եւ հարաբերությունների մշակույթի փոխանցումի Glendale-ի եւ Ղափանի միջեւ։
Շնորհակալություն,
Mr. Manoukian has another gift for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the mayor for visiting us. I was part of the delegation in 2003 when we went to Apan, and it was a wonderful trip. We learned so much about the city. It's a beautiful city that they have with actual rivers running through the city, which is unusual, not like the LA River. And the hospitality that we observed over there by the city officials and the people of the city of Apan was tremendous. I would like to thank the mayor for his hospitality, and I hope that his visit here has been fruitful. I know he is very interested in the way that the city is governed and how it's managed, and the different departments, and the amount of technology that we have here. And I know that the technology is lacking a little bit over there. However, in terms of information exchange, I think the city of Glendale can play a big part in organizing and managing the city over there with some of our technology as well as knowledge. So it was really wonderful visiting the city. It was an experience that a once-in-a-lifetime experience for me. I really appreciate his hospitality, and I would like to, on behalf of the city, donate this token of our appreciation, which doesn't have the label on it, but we'll get one with the label. And I would like to donate it on behalf of the city and welcome the mayor up onto the city of Glendale and wish him many more successful visits as well as continued cooperation with the city to better both the people of Glendale and the people of Apan.
Ուզում են ես նվիրահանձեն ձեզի եւ հույսով են, որ էսի կընդունվի իբրև հարաբերություններ երկու քաղաքի մեջ առաջացնել եւ առաջիկա տարիներին ավելի տարբեր այցելություններ լինեն քաղաքների միջև։
Շնորհակալություն։
Thank you.
So he's going to leave the hot weather here. Nice of him.
If it was you, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah. This is unusual, though. He just doesn't realize this time of year is usually different. Okay, going on. What? Make sure that don't drop that. That's beautiful. What is next, please?
Next is reappointment of Onik Mehrabian to the Traffic and Parking Commission.
Mr. Manoukian?
Yes, I'd like to move, please.
Second.
Okay, and I have a card on this. 2 minutes. Barry Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and, of course, very importantly, the public. Mr. Mehrabian is probably a delightful person. However, during his tenure of office, he failed to acknowledge that he owns 2 properties within a commercial zone on Glen Oaks. Now, Vanguard has filed an amendment complaint with the FPPC regarding that particular properties because he failed to acknowledge it. Now, in February, at the commission meeting, Commissioner Mehrabian indicated that he has 2 properties on the corner blocks of Glen Oaks Boulevard and mentioned that he has never had problems with parking for his employees. Now, the law requires him to fill out a statement of economic responsibility of economic interest, the Form 700. Now, there is certainly some question as to the letter of the law because of the conflict of interest code, because we don't know if there's a parking structure that's going to go into that area or not go into that area. But I think if you're looking at somebody who is very interested in the city, he probably is. But I think before you reappoint him, he must follow the law as everyone else, just as you gentlemen have to follow it. And I think that that stands to be. Now, with regard to the Transportation and Parking Commission, they failed to have 4 meetings in the last fiscal year, something I think that you may want to look at as to the need for the Transportation and Parking Commission. I'm Barry Allen for Vanguard. Thank you.
I think Mr. Mehrabian.
Do we go to postpone, or there's been a motion and a second? Mr. Garcia, do you have any comment at all? Okay.
No, don't.
I have a comment.
Mr. Najarian?
And I would like a clarification. We as councilmen have a more broader range of duties to disclose financial interests.
Correct. Your disclosure categories are broader.
Commissioners have a much more narrow range. I don't think it's fair that anyone violate the law, but I do expect each commissioner to follow the law as we instruct them. As a commissioner, you receive a packet from the clerk's office, I believe, perhaps in conjunction with the city attorney, indicating the types of disclosures that are necessary. And I think each commission maybe has a different type of disclosure category. So I'm all in favor of disclosing up to the law, but I don't think we should impose on anyone any duties greater than the law requires. In fact, I think we do need to comply with the letter of the law, and it would be discriminatory for us as a council to impose any greater duties than the FPPC would require on our commissioners. So I haven't looked into this particular issue, but or what the allegations are. I'm not aware of any breach of the FPPC filing regulations or the city's regulations. Would there be such a breach? That would be germane to my consideration for this candidate. But until I'm notified of a breach of his duties, I'll be voting for him.
Mr. Yusefian?
Mr. Mayor, I think to eliminate some of these problems, I am going to pull my second off of this nomination. I think we should just put this back on the agenda for next week and allow Mr. Mehrabian to amend his Form 700 that gives all the disclosures, and expect our city clerk to let us know.
I don't know if you can do it next week, but I'd like to know if he has been deficient and still is.
I don't
As
have,
you said, there's a different set of standards for commissioners, so.
Mr. Mayor, I do not have any information that Form 700 with respect to real property interest was not filed correctly by
We need
Mr.
to-
Rabian, so we would need to follow up and
Need
get
to
that
look
back to you if
into
you
it.
want.
I need to put it back on the agenda as soon as you can.
That's fine.
Okay?
So
So-
come back, not necessarily.
It
Right.
should be an easy one, easy fix.
Okay, that's removed from the agenda. 3D.
3D is appointment of Patrick Foley to the Glendale Water and Power Commission.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to nominate and move that Patrick Foley be approved as our new Glendale Water and Power Commissioner.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have one card. Barry Allen, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council staff, and the public. I'm Barry Allen with Vanguard. I have no problem with Mr. Patrick Foley. However, I think that the city council should certainly accelerate their appointing commissioners, because now with this appointment, Mr. Foley will make a quorum for the GWP. And so if one person doesn't show, guess what? No meetings. And you've done the same thing with the Women's Commission by failing to appoint 3 people to it, so there is exactly enough for a quorum. Of course, that may well be what you're attempting to do away with the commission. So easy to do. Just don't reappoint them and say, well, it takes 5 of us, or as Mr. Weaver would say, 3 to tango. And I think that we really need to look at our priorities and certainly get them correct. And I think Mr. Yusefian certainly was on target on getting this matter with Mr. Morabian cleaned up before it comes back on the agenda. And we won't even go into campaign contributions. It's too bad that in Glendale, the people who sit on commissions and boards don't get compensated the way they do in the city and county of Los Angeles and in the state of California. Then it certainly would be worth the investment to be able to get a paid position instead of having to work so hard for so little. I'm Barry Allen from Vanguard.
Mr. Mnuchin?
Mr. Kasagian, have we received, I haven't received any applications for the Women's Commission yet as the...
Just give us time.
Just stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Okay. Never mind.
Mr. Najarian?
Mr. Mayor,
We have a motion on
The
the floor.
motion is
oh,
up.
I'm sorry, we didn't vote on that. Thank
No.
Not yet.
you. I will. No comment at this time.
Okay, roll call.
Council members Menuchyan,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Montero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. Okay, did you,
Yes, I did have
Mr.
something to
Najarian?
add. Mr. Mayor, I would like to place on the agenda for next week the reappointment of Mr. Aram Sahakian to a term on the Transportation and Parking Commission.
okay, so done? Okay,
Okay,
Mr. Yusefian?
Mr. Weaver, as we talked about the art board, I would like to put the name of Ms. Hanford for the Alex Regional Art Board on the agenda. Also, for the status of women, as both of us were on for 2 positions, I would like to put the nomination of Grace Walker and Lisa Kund on the agenda also.
Thank you. Were there any others that we had to put on? Okay, I guess that's it for now. What is next, please?
Next is City Council or staff comments.
Mr. Mnuchin?
Yes, I will be out at Farmers Market on Brand Boulevard this Thursday.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, it's tomorrow.
I keep forgetting it's not Tuesday.
Yes.
And only one I'll repeat again, the Glendale Symphony Orchestra is having a fundraiser at the Oakmont Country Club July 14th. All the contestants in the Miss Universe pageant will be there. They're going to be bringing, I've been told, 88 gifts from their respective countries that will be auctioned off or silent auction. So it will be a unique opportunity to purchase something from some country you may never ever visit. It'll be a sit-down dinner following the silent auction. The tickets are $50 each. It's almost sold out already. If you are interested, you can call the Glendale Symphony Orchestra Association at 818-500-8720 for additional tickets. It'll be starting at 6 in the evening for the dinner and program running till 9:30, 10 o'clock. Okay? And Mr. Najarian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It has been about slightly less than 2 months now that I've been elected to the MTA board, and I thought it was time for a report to the community. I know there have been several calls, friends, and my colleagues as well have asked what's going on up there. very good things have transpired in the last 2 weeks. We were able to avert a strike by the bus operators and the mechanics union. We did come to a contract agreement with them, with the UTU and the ATU. They did get a modest raise in their salaries, amounting to 10% over 3 years. The mayor of Los Angeles, Chairman Villaraigosa of the MTA, although not playing a direct role, was certainly, his shadow was certainly cast over the players, and his influence, I think, was quite well placed by bringing the two groups together. It was a very harmonious contract negotiation, and no, they did not make any contributions to the mayor's campaign coffers or to anyone on the Metro board. That was a very good bit of news. The budget was also passed last month. We had a very fortunate series of events in which I was able to obtain $150,000 of planning money for a study to connect the Gold Line in Pasadena to the Orange Line in the Valley. What we have are two great valleys without a quick and efficient means of transportation between them. So this money for $150 is for a feasibility study.
$50,000.
$150,000. What did I say?
$150.
$150,000 is going to be a feasibility study to see if such a project will work. The important thing is that the project has been identified. We do have funding, so this is a small step, although a very important step in the creation and the ultimate operation of this line that will run between the San Fernando Valley and the Pasadena Gold Line in the San Gabriel Valley. We're looking for some stops in the city of Glendale. We're looking at possible alignments that will really bring the commuters quickly from the Pasadena end to the Burbank end, and that opens up the entire San Fernando Valley. And in Glendale also, it would open up the entire Gold Line, which will soon be extended out further east. Also, I was able to obtain $250,000 for a study of something called a DMU, which is a diesel multiple unit. It's a fairly new technology, and it is a smaller rail car which runs on existing tracks, which can be run in between the morning and evening Metrolink runs, virtually in any part of the Southland where the tracks are available. So what this is going to do is bring greater connectivity between downtown Los Angeles, Glendale, and further north up to the Santa Clarita and Antelope Valley. So we're very excited about those developments. Again, small steps, but we're moving in the right direction. And I was also fortunate enough to be placed on the planning committee for the MTA, which is a very important committee because all the future projects must go through that committee first. So to the extent that I can represent the city of Glendale and the other cities in our sector, I'm going to be trying very hard to get as much transit money, highway improvement money, and rail money as possible to help solve some of the traffic issues facing the region and the entire LA basin. So I will update occasionally as the developments arise.
Okay, question, the $150,000, is that to the city of Glendale or to the Tri-City? How's that money going to flow?
The Tri-City area, as you know, as you allude to, funded about $95,000 of money for an initial study for this. We call it the missing link between Pasadena and the Orange Line. This money is going to take, it's MTA money. The studies and planning will be done at the MTA level, but we are going to build on the findings that are raised and are presented from the initial study that was funded. So you could say the seed money was planted by Burbank, Pasadena, and Glendale.
Okay.
And
so the money's been earmarked for that purpose, being done by the MTA.
Yes.
With our being able to give input and get results.
Yes, yes. Again, it's very in the early stages, but this is how you get a project going.
Oh, yeah.
You start the planning and you move forward. So we're hoping to have something done relatively quickly in the terms of planning, maybe in 3 to 4 years or so. If I can twist the right arms at the MTA board, we could have some sort of nice express transit connecting the two valleys through Glendale, as well as perhaps running a spur to the Burbank airport.
Sounds good. That's a good start. Mr. Yusefian.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to my colleague to know when the DMU is not a new idea. Actually, I think Larry Zarian was talking about it when he was on the council and the board. These are diesel units, but they're self-propelled. You don't have to have a car pulling it or pushing it. They're already self-contained. Just put them on there and let them go. So unfortunately, at the time Larry was talking about it, everybody kind of turned their nose up to him, and it's amazing to me that after 10 years they kind of come back to what was talked about. So, but I think it's a good system. It was a good system then. It's a good system now.
Hopefully it'll work.
Any other comments? Okay, what's next, please?
Next is consent items, including minutes of following a routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council, actually, there was one oral communication.
No, not on city council and staff comments.
Okay.
That's for city council and staff.
All right.
Sorry, Mr. Allen.
Any question about matters on the agenda?
Mr. Allen?
Yeah?
No.
Well, okay, I think that's a Brown Act violation.
Mr. Garcia, is that a Brown Act violation?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor. The Brown Act requires a public comment before each item that has discussion, deliberation, or action by the council, because the council comment period is not either any of those. It's just for quick reports and quick requests from
council.
staff. It does
Staff.
not qualify for a public comment period of its own.
Thank you.
And if there are comments that want to be made in response to anything brought up during a report, any member of the public is free to address those comments during the oral communications period of the agenda.
Thank you. Number 5, please.
Consent items, including minutes of following a routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
Mr. Yusefian?
Move consent.
Second.
Move in second. Roll call, please.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. What is next?
Next is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and a report.
Speaker Barry Allen, followed by Dr. Richard Espiritu.
2 minutes?
Fine.
You know the routine, Mr. Allen. You
What's
get-
that?
You know the routine. You get 5 minutes.
But I was looking at the number right here, and I just wanted to
When
make
the city
sure.
clerk sets the time, you
Thank
get
you.
your 5 minutes as you usually do.
Mr. Mayor, council staff, I'm Barry Allen with Vanguard, and certainly the public. I wanted to mention while this is coming on that last week Mr. Manukian mentioned that the city of Los Angeles went from $11 to $18 on their rubbish collection, and I brought up the issue that it was for police protection, and in reality it was for police protection, and apparently the city of Los Angeles didn't notify their people that live there based upon the new fees for water. And that's one thing, and Mr. Manukian, I will pass this for Mr. Manukian. And also that last week there was an issue regarding, I think in the banquet halls, relative to the issue of smoke and other problems, and that the neighborhood services would not be allowed to enforce the smoke ordinance. And I think indeed we have found a solution for that. And what do I have to do here? Basically, the solution is for members of the public to call 1-800-CUT-SMOG. That's the phone number of the AQMD, and they have investigators on duty 24/7 that will be able to respond to the needs of the community on the smoking. Now, they're really not concerned with backyard barbecues, nor are they concerned with the family going to the park and having and grilling and making some smoke there. They're concerned with commercial outdoor grilling, and that's 1-800-CUT-SMOG. The other issue, I think, was at the planning budget planning session last week, and Mr. Najarian said that he ran on a platform of public safety and whatever they want, whatever they need, and we have been giving them whatever they want and whatever they need at the cost of Meals on Wheels and senior meals and things like that. There is a solution, and as a law and order guy and a public safety guy, Mr. Najarian certainly could accept this program. It would be adding 100 more firefighters for almost nothing. 100 firefighters for almost nothing. Now, think about it. What does a firefighter get? A firefighter recruit gets about, $61,000 a year. And if you divide that number into the $5 million worth of overtime, you got 85 new firefighters. Boom, like that, and they'll all be paying dues into the union. And by the same time that you're done, you add another 20 or 30 reserve officers, and now you've got a fire department that can work 12-hour shifts and can spend time with their family and probably reduce the number of injuries. Do you know what the major cause of fatalities in firefighters is? Does anybody know what it is? There are two major causes.
Traffic
Number
accidents?
one is heart attacks. Number two is traffic accidents. So if we can spend more time and have bright-eyed and bushy-tailed people working 12-hour shifts instead of 24, and I certainly think to get 100 more firefighters for almost nothing, Mr. Najarian, you've really got to consider that, because it can work. So check it out. We'll be speaking more about this in the weeks to come, and you'll see that you can have a heavy-duty, well-provided fire department and continue to provide senior services, youth services, meals, and recreation that makes this a full, well-rounded community instead of one that has to pick up and do things on a piecemeal basis and look for 100,000 here and 100,000 there. I'm Barry Allen for the benefit of Glendale Vanguard. Bye.
Next speaker, Dr. Richard Spiritu, followed by Vicki McCovey or something like that. I'm sorry.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff. I am Dr. Richard Espiritu. Mr. Manukian, last week you were kind enough to talk about the lousy sidewalks over in Chevy Chase, and you asked them to take a look at it because it was all broken up and everything. And I think Mr. Starbird said they would look into that sooner, if not later, and they would do it right away. My presentation this week is going to be called Walk Down Memory Lane. This is a strip of road from Dryden and Pacific, right close to going down Dryden up to Columbus, down Columbus to Louise to Ralph's Market. First slide. This is a picture of the corner of Louise or Columbus and Dryden. If you notice, there's no curb cut there on the northwest corner. Next slide. This is on the corner of Stocker and Columbus. What's interesting about this corner is there's 3 curb cuts, and the northeast corner does not have a curb cut. And that is where both east and west traffic for the B line is. It's impossible to get across that street if you're in a wheelchair. Next slide. This is on the corner of Columbus and Lorraine. They did a curb cut on the north side. There's no curb cut on the south side. You do one, you don't do the other one. Next slide. This is on Lorraine and Valley View. 4 curb cuts, 1 missing. Do 3, you don't do 1. Next one. This is on the This is the alleyway just west of Central Avenue on Lorraine. They have a curb cut on one side, but there isn't a curb cut on the other side of that alleyway. I first brought attention to this because of a little Armenian lady who was going to church Sunday who lives, and she asked me to help her get across that step because she was on her way to catch the B line to go to church on Sunday. Next slide, please. This is right on the corner of Lorraine and Central. This thing hasn't been cleaned up in a long time, and this is a small curb cut. Next slide. This is from Ralph's Market looking down Lorraine. It's very interesting that the parking we're revisiting Barden versus Sacramento. And I came to the understanding that the Department of Public Works divides the city up into 12 different districts. And once every year they go through the city and take care of one of those districts. This area, by the way, hasn't been fixed for at least 5 years that I know of because I walk to Ralph's Market almost every day to have coffee with my cronies. Last week, okay. Oh, this is, go to the last slide. There are a number of people who live in Area 14 that have wheelchairs that run up and down that area. I know of 5 individuals who are in motorized wheelchairs. Last week I talked about the parks. The interesting thing about the parks is that, like this one with the curb cuts, you do 1 curb cut, you do 3 curb cuts, and you don't do 1. The parks is very interesting. You'll do 1 park correctly with the water fountains. You won't do it correctly in the other park. You do the tables correctly in 1 park, but you won't do it correctly in the other park. Who is responsible for the parks? Is it Mrs. Wilkinson? Is it Mr. George Chapshin? Is it Mr. Starberg? Is it you, Mr. Yusefian, because you're a contractor? Or is it Mr. Manukian because you were mayor at the time these 2 city projects were going? This is obviously a situation where the Department of Public Works hasn't had a chance to go through and take care of things. I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Mr. Zern, hate to put you on the spot, would you
Well, I think
about
Mr. Espiritu's last statement is exactly right. We haven't had a chance to go through the city.
our limited budget on that?
We do have
how
12
you work it throughout the city?
We do, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we do have 12 maintenance districts. We do not necessarily get through a maintenance district each year. Some of our maintenance districts are very large, has a lot of work in those. We've been known to be in a maintenance district for as long as 3 years. You may recall it has only been in the last few years when we've dedicated money to the sidewalk program that we've actually been able to get the maintenance cycle down. Right before I became director, our cycle was 30 years, and that was a rough estimate. So that meant that every 30 years we made a circle of the city. We're down to about 15 now. So we are making progress. And as we get to the neighborhoods, we continue to not only install ramps where there aren't ramps now, but to improve ramps to current code.
So
I think you saw a picture of a couple of ramps that wouldn't meet today's code, according to the Green Book, but we improve those when we go through.
when you put out a contract, a concrete contract, I don't know, you do it for sidewalks and curbs throughout a sector of the city, or is it in some bigger contract? I know you try to get efficiency of work with a contract.
We do it 2 ways. The sidewalk repair, along with the ADA curb ramps, is done district by district. If we do a major street project, Brand, for instance, we included the sidewalks in that project. We'll go through, for instance, when we did San Fernando Road as a large project, we did selective R&R on that, replacement and removal, or removal and replacement, and upgrades as we needed them. So we actually hit it in a couple of different ways. But the main sidewalk and curb ramp program is an annual program that we come to you with every year. We have at least for the last solid 5 years to try to make those upgrades.
And then it has to go against other priorities in terms of how many dollars we can put into each program.
Well, I can tell you, Mr. Mayor, we've been pretty vigilant about setting that aside because we were very concerned about where the condition of sidewalks were going. And that 30-year cycle, to me, was leading us to the same place that L.A. is in today when they tell you it'll take 85 years to get to your neighborhood, which I think is unacceptable. So we've dedicated some money at the expense of other projects to try to make to get some catch-up going with the sidewalk program. And we have made a lot of progress. We've got that cycle down in half, and we'll continue to try to whittle away at it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, to be clear, are we obligated to install the wheelchair ramps on corners if we're not otherwise improving the sidewalks or the street?
Mr. Garcia could better answer this question, but I think there's an obligation for us to put those in. What our policy has been is as we go through and do an area and repair sidewalks, we either put the ramps in or we replace them and bring them up to current code.
And that's my understanding too, Mr. Mayor, that as you're doing
That's
the work,
compliant with the law.
right, as you're doing the work as part of your program, as your improvement program, each improvement program has to have a disability ADA component to comply with the law.
Thank you. Mr. Youssef.
Mr. Mayor, another question was brought up that dealt with the parks. I'm assuming, and shouldn't be using that word, but let me use that word. I'm assuming that when we approve mini parks or any kind of a parks, the design of that goes to Mr. Zern's department at Building and Safety, and they check for all the requirements for a
All the parks should be designed so that they are completely ADA compliant.
Okay. And if there are new mini parks that we have built recently that we have some issues with, and I think one was brought up as far as Pacific Edison, and that was done in 2001, which is recently, maybe what we should do is have our parks administrator kind of make a list, just like he has a list.
If I can, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Seven, we are following up on all those issues raised by
We
Mr.
are.
Spiritu,
Okay.
some of which I will tell you there are very sound answers to. They're not out of compliant. Any case we find we're out of compliant, we'll address those, especially on those newer parks where, frankly, they should have been installed and for whatever reason, in some cases, slipped past the inspectors. We'll address those as well. We'll bring those back to you.
Okay. And one other item was, in the pictures, if you saw, Mr. Zern, there was one that had a corner, not only didn't have a ramp, you couldn't even put a ramp because there is a light pole right there.
Yes.
And I think there was one, something like that on
They're looking at
somewhere else.
We actually, Mr. Yusefian, have several of those where we're going to have to deal with either the movement of a
They're
light
being
fixture.
addressed, right?
utility
I think we
pole.
got to deal with
Okay.
that.
Next speaker, Valerie.
Oh, Vicki McConnell. Sorry, that's my
I'm
writing.
sorry.
I know.
Followed by Lori Collins.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Vicki McConnell. I own Fast Frame of Glendale and Brand. First off, I would like to thank you for keeping the Arts and Culture Commission as it is within Parks and Rec. I think it's really helpful to the economy of Glendale. And I think all of you know about July 9th, this Sunday, the Open Studio Tour. But for the benefit of anyone in the audience that isn't aware, that between 11 and 6 this Sunday, City of Glendale Parks and Recs has set up Open Studio Tours in 32 locations within the city with at least 70 artists spread out throughout these locations. And I came here tonight to invite you to my location, which is one of them, which is at 112 North Brand. For people interested in getting a map of the locations and the artists that are showing there, like I said, there's 32 locations. You can get the Verdugo Monthly. July has a 2-page map. The City of Glendale website is also a resource to get that map and some more information, and there it is. That's excellent. And then also my website, fastframeofglendale.com. So I look forward to seeing you there, and I welcome you, and we'll have refreshments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Lori Collins, followed by Jim Damone.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Lori Collins, and I'm here to speak on 702 East Glen Oaks. Twice I've asked the city to hold a neighborhood public meeting so that my neighbors' concerns and questions regarding the proposed rezoning of 702 East Glen Oaks can be addressed in a dialogue. This City Council has refused to direct the Planning Department to conduct such a meeting. Since the city refuses to come to my neighborhood, I've decided to bring some of my neighborhood to council. I'd like to show you the first picture. This is a home that's located across the street from 702 East Glen Oaks. Very nice home. It's really representative of my neighborhood. It's lovely, historic, and it's well kept. This picture this home is owned by a family by the name of Cheverdians. Mr. Cheverdians and his family get to look at this home across the street. This is 702 East Glen Oaks. You can see the lawn is brown. The next picture shows 702 East Glen Oaks with car parked on the lawn. This is a Range Rover. Here is on a different day. It's the same Range Rover. I think what's interesting about this picture is this is the stake that used to have the posting for the rezoning. Apparently, the posting and the stake got in the way of the Range Rover, and it came down. Okay? And these are on different dates. If you look at the this license plate, this is it says MK Design, and the initials up against the front door of this house, next to the front door in big brass letters, it says MK. So this is obviously the owner's car and the owner's property. This isn't an isolated incident because here's another car, different car, maybe it's an employee, parked on the lawn at 702 East Glen Oaks. This is a picture of the interior of the garage. And inside the garage, you're going to see, my garage looks pretty bad too, but it isn't full of construction materials. This is scaffolding. This is signs for a construction company. This is bags of some sort of insulation. And what's interesting about this picture, on this very day, the neighbor took this picture, and the applicants called the police on the woman who lives next door for taking this picture. And they also called the police on the 9-year-old man who lives next door for watering the lawn. In these neighborhoods, you have very close setbacks, and I have to, in order to get in and out of my car, take my groceries out, step on my neighbor's lawn, and I certainly hope they're going to call the police on me for doing so. This picture, this last one, is what the Chakowskis could look at in their backyard. If this is converted to rezoned to commercial, you're not supposed to store anything. The charter says you can't store anything outside. This is what it looks like in their backyard, from the Chakowskis' backyard. It looks worse if you look over from the other side. So I'd like to bring these pictures to your attention. The City Council must make findings that the proposed zoning promotes public health, safety, or welfare. In addition, the Council has been considering, and the Planning Department, what's called overlay zoning. If you consider overlay zoning, you're also supposed to consider the peace of the neighborhood, the public peace of the neighborhood. I don't believe that there's anything in these pictures that indicates that you're going to be able to make the findings that this zoning promotes public health, safety, welfare, and peace. In fact, I think it's the contrary. Finally, the city has received another protest filed by the owner of the immediately adjacent property to the west, 702 East Glen Oaks. This is the dental office, and I believe they have 80 feet of frontage. And if the protest is valid, then we're going to have over 70% of frontage under the charter. Also, I've handed to the city clerk a page of signatures that have been signed by members of the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council. And I hope you consider all this information when you meet next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jim Damone, followed by Paula Devine.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Dimov, D-I-M-O-V, spell the last name. And I'm very privileged to meet you, Mr. Mayor, and the City Council, City of Glendale. I have a very important subject to discuss. Before I go into that, I would like to tell you that I'm very disappointed of this ticketing business. It is a great burden to the people of Glendale to have tickets. I have 2 tickets here of my son who parked in front of the apartment where we live, and $40 each ticket. That's not fair. It's illegal parking. In fact, it's not illegal. It's unconstitutional, actually, to give tickets. I know the city is getting a lot of revenue from that, but this is not fair to ticket us. We're hardworking people. I'm on Social Security, $600 a month, and my son is working day and night to get a little bit of money to pay our rent. And on top of everything, we have no parking, and we're punished for parking. It's not illegal parking. That's not illegal. We are entitled to park there. The city should give a warning ticket when a person is parked, when the clinic street is, let's say Tuesday, whatever is the date. That person who parked there should clean that area, not to be ticketed, to be punished for parking in a place he has no other place to park. That's not fair. But this is not the main subject. I would like to each one of you to receive a copy of these tickets. And these tickets should be waived and never given tickets anymore to collect money from people, to punish them for living in the city of, great city of Glendale. I'm very privileged to live in this city. I'm from Los Angeles originally, and I suffered so much there. This morning I faced the Los Angeles County supervisors. They had meeting there, and they gave me 3 minutes only, and I was still thankful for that. And I would like to give each one of you what I spoke about. I don't know how many people I have here, but I'll keep one for myself. I was told you have 5 city councils and the mayor, 6 altogether. Maybe I should have more copies made. But this subject I'm going to talk about is the most important for the state of California and the United States. I am a candidate for governor of California, and I would like the mayor of this city and the city council to back me up to get out of this horrible situation the Los Angeles county and city put me into, and the state of California as well. The county alone owes me more than $40 million, believe it or not. I own property which is worth more than $100 million. The city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, the state of California supported these people who robbed me from this property, and now I am homeless. I live in an apartment. I can't even rent an apartment because my credit is very, very low. In other words, I have no even reputation. I could not even apply for an apartment to rent. They will deny because my 2 sons, finally they gave us an apartment, and my wife and I and my 2 sons live in one apartment in Glendale here. But we talk about budget here. Always deficit, not enough money. When I become the governor, I'm going to make a very strong statement. It's going to be based on facts. I will more than triple the economy of the state of California within a few years only. I have 2 inventions which are not my own, but I own both of them. One of them, I would be able to produce electricity and isogas, new type of gasoline for our cars, which is going to be made out of garbage. I have the blueprints how to build a plant next to every landfill, and out of garbage I'm going to be able to produce electricity and isogas. This isogas was demonstrated in 1979, and it was on Channel 2. We put the isogas into the carburetor, began to move the car, pollution-free, and it's going to cost us 29 cents a gallon. And the other invention is much, much greater than this. I found it in one of my apartments. I used to owe 250 apartments, and everything was taken away from me because of fraud, widespread fraud.
Sorry, sir, your time is up. If
Okay,
you'd like to come back next week, you can.
Next week, okay, I'll be happy to come next week, and I'm sure you'll be very interested to hear about the second invention.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Paula Devine, followed by Margaret Hammond.
Mayor Weaver, City Council, my name is Paula Devine. I'm here on behalf of the Commission on the Status of Women to talk a little bit about our latest project. I'd like to inform the community that we are
We have pledged to Habitat for Humanity and the Kenwood Project $5,000. Our first fundraiser is going to be at the cruise night on July 15th, which is always a great event. We're going to have a table, and at that table we'll have a dollhouse, empty. And what we're hoping is that that night the community comes to cruise night with open hearts and open wallets and feeling very generous, and hopefully they will fill our house with money so that we can donate it to Habitat for Humanity for the Kenwood Project. They will be building 11 homes, and there are 11 teams. The team that we are supporting is called Women's Build, and it's made up of all women, and we will build that house, one of them. And so we're hoping that everybody that comes to cruise night, and there are thousands we know, that we can fill up this dollhouse and donate it all to Habitat for Humanity and make a dream come true for a family here in Glendale. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Hanlon, followed by Herbert Milano.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. I did. Got too much sun, but I ought to know better by now.
Didn't you wear a hat?
Oh, I always wear one, but, you know, it burns me somehow anyway. My name is Margaret Hammond, if I didn't say so. I want to start off saying I want to thank you for the new handicap parking in the lower lot. I think there's 3 or 4. I found out about it last week. Although I did see one car parked there without their handicap showing. So I would say hello. If they don't have a handicap sign, they get a ticket.
It was Mr. Najarian's car.
Okay, I'm going to tell on you.
That is slander,
I'm going to call on my.
That is slander.
And I also want to thank Mayor Weaver and Mr. Manukian for coming down to Adams Square last week. We were also excited from our group. We're kind of a noisy, rowdy group, I guess you might say, because we were quite excited about the gas station, our gas station park being started, and we're really looking forward to that. Now, here we are. The laws are passed by the people so we can live in peace together and solidify all our rights. And when we have the laws being violated in favor of money grabbers and against private citizens, this is wrong. Start with the Hillside Ordinance. It states in there that 7,500 square foot lot is necessary in order to build. That's one of the rules. And yet, the City Council allowed a building on a 6,200 square foot lot, which is in violation of the laws of the ordinance. This is wrong. Then there's a 6 a.m. start time being allowed for the Americana building, and that is in violation of our 7 a.m. law to start working. This is in detriment, a very large one, to the Great Western Motel business. After all, who wants to stay in a motel and be woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning? I'd be out there pitching stuff at them. And in the winter months, that will still be dark. And then the next one is changing the zoning to commercial for a single person who wants to run a business in an R1R. And this is being done without residents' approval and is not in their best welfare at 702 Glen Oaks. Now, my favorite subject, banquet halls, which are still being allowed to cook outside on big barbecues and make smells and odors and smoke. And that is against our city laws, as I've read over and over. And yet it's being allowed, so you're breaking the laws of the city. It's absolutely unbelievable. And then there's never enough parking. And what about the fire sprinklers? When are we going to think about that? What's necessary at these banquet halls? How many laws can our city council violate and yet still claim that they represent all the people of Glendale. I don't think that sounds good to me. A lot of people having their rights violated. And also, remember this, it's supposed to be a representation of the people, by the people, for the people, all the people, not just a few. So I would really like you to think over what's been happening in the last few weeks, that there's a lot of things going on that are not in the best interest of all the people, for the people. Again, there is the idea that people who don't like the grilling can phone, and I spoke to them, to a gentleman at the AQMD, and it's absolutely illegal for those fire pits. Absolutely. And of course, he gave me the number to call, and he told me to have the people that live close by call this number, that live next to those banquets halls that are doing the outside grilling. And again, it's 1-800-CUT-SMOG, because it is smog, and it's illegal, no different than having a car without a proper smog control on it. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, Herbert Milano.
Good evening. My name is Herbert Bolano, Mayor David Weaver, members of the City Council, City staff. It's always a pleasure to follow in the footsteps of Margaret Hammond. She has been my inspiration because she's outspoken and tells it like it is. I had a vision of Glendale a long time ago, a vision where we could have a central park, and an urban park where everyone would come together, and we could celebrate a 4th of July. This vision of the Central Park was not my vision alone. It was a vision back in 1996 when the Downtown Strategic Plan was developed. And we were at that time, or the leaders at that time, were thinking of a Centennial Park. Oftentimes I heard Mr. Weaver, Mayor Weaver, speak about having this big concert up in the open air. But I believe that many residents of Glendale had to go somewhere else this year. Burbank at the Starlight Bowl, Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. I went down to Long Beach to the to the aquarium, and looked at a very significant area for the people to walk by, amazing landscaping. I even got a chance to be reminded of Mr. Nigerian. I went to the aquarium and saw the shark tank. You know, and I remember.
I might bite you, Mr. Nolan.
So I remember
was the great
how
white there?
not such a large shark. Just But nonetheless, Mr. Nigerian, you remember that during the campaign, you did give verbal support to the concept that we could have a large urban central park where communities can come together. And so did Mr. Quintero, and so did Mr. Weaver, and so did Mr. Yusefian. All of you verbalized that concept and supported it. Mini parks obviously will not fit the bill for this type of activity because they can just hold barely a few dozen people. We need a central urban park to accommodate the thousands and thousands of residents that will be living in this area of downtown. But it is also needed in order that our communities can come together and we can all have a place where we can celebrate a 4th of July as a community. We need a 3-acre park there. We need a place that is cultural and attracts people from the region and from throughout the whole city to come together to make these celebrations. We absolutely need one. And we have many examples throughout Southern California of how communities have actually come together and celebrate all of these events in a centralized place. We don't have one. And I suggest that you be true to your campaign promise and that you still have a chance to salvage this large area around the Central Library to make that a true urban park where we can have concerts and we can come together. Thank you very much.
That's the end of oral communications. Oral communications is closed. What is next, please?
Next is adoption of ordinances, and since there are none, we move straight to action items. 8A, Director of Public Works regarding amendments to Chapter 15.12 of the GMC 1995 relating to grading, fills, and excavations, and to Appendix Chapter 33 of the 2001 California Building Code. as adopted in Volume 1 of the Glendale Building and Safety Code 2002. At 8A1 is ordinance for introduction, amending the various sections of Chapter 15.12, and at 8A2, ordinance for introduction, amending and adding various sections of Appendix 33.
Mr. Yusefian.
Mr. Mayor, we have had a study session on this item, and there were some issues that was brought up, and staff had made some corrections this morning. I caught a few more, which I had a meeting with Mr. Zern. Some of them were grammatical, some were just they've forgotten it. So all those, I'm told, that have been corrected, and so at this time I would like to introduce the ordinance at 8A1 and 2. Also, staff did provide us with the little drawings, which was not part of our original packet, which I had asked, and I'd like to thank Mr. Stewart for this drawing, which makes it easier for us non-engineers to understand what he was talking about in the drawing.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Mr.
Garcia?
Mr. Mayor, I think for the record, we need to have somebody from staff go over the comments that were discussed with Mr. Yusefian, so they're introduced as part of the introduction, so when we bring them back next week, they can be adopted at that time, rather than having to explain what it is then. So I think maybe Mr. Tom can just briefly do that.
Going to Mr. Zern, who's going to Mr. Tom.
I think Mr. Tom, I can quickly go through. I think Mr. Yusefian hit what was the most, what I thought was the most important was we left those off. I apologize for that. Somewhere between our submittal, it didn't get on. One of the comments that Mr. Yusefian had made at the study session was his desire to see visually one of the issues, and Mr. Tom deservedly getting that recognition for having put that figure L together. The other issues we discussed this morning was again a grammatical last sentence of exception to section 3305.2.3. We had an extra word also in there. Shall also not is what it said. It should just say shall not. We also had in item number 10 of section 3306.2. We had a statement that said an excavation that is less than 2 feet and not closer than 2 feet. There seemed to be a discrepancy. We added the word deep. So it will say an excavation that is less than 2 feet deep and not closer than 2 feet. One of the issues that was brought up, Mr. Yusefian brought up, was he saw a term in let's see, it was section 3305.1.3 under exceptions. It said public way. Mr. Yusefian questioned whether that should be public right-of-way. In a discussion with Mr. Tom, he clarified that the term public way is consistent with the term in the building code. It means public right-of-way, but also means a little bit broader statement that covers issues in the building code. So we're going to leave that as public way. So we're consistent.
Something new.
There was also, I think probably the next most significant after the exhibits was Mr. Yusefian had asked us for a definition of the permit area boundary, the grading permit area boundary, which Mr. Tom crafted and will have in the final document.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if you'd like, that exact language has been added to the final version, and it reads as follows: grading permit area boundary means the perimeter of the area for which grading activities are authorized under a valid grading permit. One final item is to be consistent with the additional figure L. We went back and did a search for the reference to the figures, and previously there was a reference to figures A through K, and we caught that and made it consistent with the new figure, so it now reads figures A through L, and with that we have addressed all the concerns raised by the council during the study session.
That's good.
Mr. Tom, is that okay, Mr. Garcia? Okay, properly introduced. What is next, please?
At 8B is Director of Administrative Services regarding proposed amendments to the salary ordinance and amendments to the supplemental benefit ordinance for certain officers, subordinate officers, assistants, deputies, clerks, and employees of the City of Glendale for their compensation. At 8B1 is urgency ordinance for introduction, salary GFFA.
Okay, do I have a card? Do the card before the intro.
Do the card.
Barry Allen, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and the public. I'm Barry Allen. I know that you have all reviewed this information, and apparently the urgency ordinance number 1 for introduction covers, I assume it to be, the new salary for the GFFA. Now, 2 questions arise from that. I see that there's a cost of living adjustment of 4% and a salary increase of 4%. So that makes it an 8% salary increase. Now, I certainly could be wrong. I certainly don't have the benefit and expertise of Mr. Franz or Mr. Starbird, but I certainly have the ability to ask the question. Now, the other question I have along the same line is that what index is does the city base their cost of living adjustment on? Is it CPI? Is it another index? Is it a CPI for area, for region, for the military? Exactly where it is it? Does it come from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or is it just a figure that we throw out at 4%? I think those are issues that the public certainly would like to have answered, as well as I. I'm Barry Allen with Vanguard.
Mr. Mnuchin?
Yes, I've asked the question before regarding the COLA adjustment and the increase in salaries, and it's not both based on the answers that I've received.
That's correct.
Both are included in the 4%, and
Yes,
it's
that's
based
correct.
on the contracts that we have.
Yes, in other
with
words,
the associations.
the way Mr. Allen described it is incorrect.
Okay.
It is a 4%.
Right.
To answer his question, we negotiate the increase. We refer to it as a COLA, a cost of living adjustment. Generally, our discussions are around the Consumer Price Index, Los Angeles region. We generally look at April to April of each year, but again, it's negotiable.
Okay.
Thank you. Somebody want to introduce?
Is that it?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to introduce 8B1 to...
No,
No, there's
No.
more?
a card on everyone.
You want one? Okay, 8B1.
Okay, I'll read 2 into the record.
2 is the same proposed amendments to salary ordinance and amendments to supplemental benefits ordinance. Urgency ordinance at 2 is urgency ordinance for introduction, salary GMA.
Speaker, Barry Allen, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, public. The question arose whether it's because the language in this ordinance is very specific. It says salary increase. It doesn't say COLA. It doesn't say cost of living increase. And I want to know for sure that that is exactly what it is. And it is not, in each of these cases, a situation where salary and COLA are not merged together, because the language indicates that one is COLA, one is a salary increase. Thank you.
Mr. Mnuchin?
I run into the same problems. I think we label things differently, and we label the same thing with different titles. I think it's maybe we should start labeling them consistently, so it's not confusing. And
If I can, at the end of the day, these ordinances result in a salary increase, an
Right.
increase in the salary ranges. During negotiations, we generally refer to those as cost of living adjustments. That's what we negotiate around. But at the end of the day, as provided for in the ordinances, the salary ranges are increased, and it is not duplicative. It is a 4% in the case of fire. I think for GMA, it's a lesser percentage than that. But it's not, as Mr. Allen had been concerned about, it is not 2 separate increases.
But we should, in terms of labeling
It's a good point.
things, let's label them the same way, so
We should
it's
be
not
consistent.
salaries on one thing and
Right.
COLA the other.
Right.
Mr. Youssefin, did you want to?
Move 8B2.
Thank you.
I mean,
I mean,
introduce the ordinance.
introduce. Another one?
Okay, the next.
At 3 is the same proposed amendments to salary ordinance and amendments to supplemental benefits ordinance for certain officers, etc. At 3 is urgency ordinance for introduction, salary for executives.
One speaker, Barry Allen, 2 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and community. Thank you, Mr. Mnuchin, for realizing that there is really a need of nomenclature matching. But as we look at all these things, why are these actually urgency ordinances? After all, we know what the contract is called for each year, and I know, again, the nomenclature, sometime in June, we could certainly say, well, this, according to the contract, is what we have agreed upon, and let's introduce it, instead of making it an urgency ordinance. And then mixing the language adds to that particular confusion. And as to the issue of cost of living adjustment, if the adjustment is negative, what would you do? And how can you adjust annually on a 4-year contract and then come back and justify the change if the change didn't, it wasn't 4%, it was 3% in some particular areas. Thank you.
Did you want to introduce that ordinance, Mr. Yusuf?
I'll let somebody else.
Somebody else like?
I'll introduce the ordinance at
833. Thank you. 4, please.
4 is urgency ordinance for introduction, benefits for the GFFA.
Thank you. Have 1 card, Barry Allen, 2 minutes.
Barry Allen, Mr. Mayor, Council, and City staff. My question here would be, I guess, directed to Mr. Sarbird, who would probably direct it to Mr. Franz, relative to what will be the cost of the increase of benefits to the public. Thank you.
Starbird, is that one we can easily answer, or?
Well, I can't easily answer because I don't have the summaries before me. But Matt Doyle, could you or Bob Franz? I'm sorry, didn't see you over there.
I mean, without getting a lot of detail.
As you know, they were costed during
In the
our
fiscal
negotiations
impact
discussion review.
section of the report, there are some dollar figures.
Correct. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Bob Friends. The cost under the fiscal impact includes the cost of both salaries and benefit increases, so that is the total that is listed there. We did not break out the cost by each ordinance. On the other hand, next week, when you have the actual 4-year memorandum of understanding in front of you, at the time you do the second reading of these ordinances, you will have the breakdown on each benefit cost in addition to these totals which are in this agenda item.
Could you tell the audience what the total is for benefits?
I don't have that with me.
Oh, it's in the agenda. It's in here.
The total for the
That's
salaries.
total,
Yeah.
That's the grand total, not the benefit.
Oh, you don't,
I don't have that with me. I'm sorry.
you don't have a breakdown of what salaries, what benefit is?
No, I did not bring that analysis with me, but
Well,
that will be on.
GFFA is 1.348 million, GPOA is 467,000.
Right.
GMA is 58,298,
Okay.
and executives is 17,400.
Right. That's the total of salaries plus benefits.
Right.
The breakdown will be in your
Breakdown.
analysis
And
next week.
the benefits is a relatively small proportion of that. So the lion's share of that, in the neighborhood of 80 to 90% of that, is generally the salary increases.
Which we'll find out next week, the exact numbers.
Right.
Yeah,
Have that for you.
for instance, on the fire, the biggest number, the $1.3 million number, that represents a 4% salary increase, and the average over the 4 years of the salaries and benefits is 4.25%. In the first year, it's a little higher than 4.25%, and the other years, it's lower.
But roughly a quarter of 1%, or about 1/18th of that amount, would be related to benefits.
Friends, how many years have you been in the finance arena?
Over 35.
Have you ever seen the cost of living go down?
I have.
No.
Yes.
I've seen a 1%.
Deflation, you're talking?
I've seen a 1% increase.
I've seen,
What year?
I've seen
1.1.
zero,
Cost of living?
yes.
On the CPI,
Early 90s on the CPI, yeah.
it's
If not I would venture to guess that it went negative at one point as well. but-
And in my time in cities, I have seen salaries go down.
But
I've seen takeaways.
That's why.
I said cost of living
Yes.
adjustment. Has
It
the
is-
cost of
it's-
living in this country ever gone down?
Yes, it has.
Well, in this
I was curious because I
region,
can't remember.
in this region where we monitor the CPI in the Los Angeles Long Beach, I believe that the lowest has been around 1%, maybe a 0.8. We've tracked it over 25 years. I can bring you that chart.
I did it for 10 years back in the 70s, and
In some regions,
It
I believe there
always went
have
up.
been
In this region, it
decreases,
always
and-
went up.
And there are some national indexes. This past April to April, which is what we were looking at when we were negotiating the CPI increase for Los Angeles, was 4.7%.
I think that's why it's important to change the titles or nomenclatures,
And it-
because these are not necessarily COLA increases.
And
These
we
are not
agree with
cost of living adjustments. These are adjustments based on the contracts that we have.
We agree with that, and frankly, in the ordinances, there are no
There are no
references to
references,
COLA.
yeah. There are only references to salaries.
And
And
in the agenda report, it really should not
Right.
be referenced to
It shouldn't say, it should say salary adjustments based on contracts.
These are
basically.
negotiated salary increases.
yeah, I think that's been thoroughly got across the staff. Thank you, Mr. Franz. Okay, was that one introduced? 4? Somebody want to introduce 4?
I don't know, did someone introduce?
I'll introduce the item, ordinance at 8B4.
Okay, next.
5 is the urgency ordinance for introduction, benefits GMA.
One speaker, Barry Allen, 2 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, Council, staff, community, I'm Barry Allen. Mr. Franz brought up a very interesting issue, and that is that you're going to be introducing these ordinances this evening to vote on next week, and the ordinances are incomplete because you don't have the exact numbers broken out of the salaries or costs of living and the other adjustments and the benefits. So something's lacking, and you're voting on, I guess, an open checkbook. And you're just going to put a signature on it, and over the week, someone will fill in a number. And by the way, this is the Consumer Price Index, national, all urban consumers, and there were a number of times where the Consumer Price Index went negative, not specifically Los Angeles, but a number of other cities. And if anyone would like to see this, it's certainly available. Thank you. I'm Barry Allen.
Somebody like to introduce?
I'll introduce the ordinance at AB5.
Thank you. Next one, 6.
6 is urgency ordinance for introduction, benefits GPOA.
One speaker, Barry Allen, 2 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, Council, staff, public, I'm Barry Allen with Vanguard, and the same issues I'm going to raise. I will raise a different issue on 7, but it is the fact that you are voting on an open, on a signed check with no numbers filled in, and those will be filled in next week. And I don't know, certainly the Assistant City Attorney would be able to make you feel better, telling you it's probably okay to approve an ordinance for adoption for next week with numbers that you don't know. But I know if I were a council member, I certainly wouldn't vote on an issue where who knows what the number will be next week, because you don't know what the numbers are this week. I'm Barry Allen for Vanguard.
Mr. Mnuchin?
Just for the record, I will disagree with Mr. Allen. The numbers are specified in the fiscal impact section of the report, so I will introduce the ordinance at 8B6.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Yusefian.
I think one thing that needs to be clarified is that we are introducing ordinances.
We're not voting.
We are not voting on them. So the ordinance is introduced, and if there is some errors, there's problems, we do not feel comfortable about it, next week we can either correct them or not vote for them. And that is been going on in this city for as long as I can remember, and probably prior to me. And that's what we did with the historical overlay zone. We introduced the ordinance, we had a study session, there'll be some modifications, then it will come back to us to vote. So just because you introduce an ordinance doesn't mean you have to vote on it. You're just introducing an ordinance. None of us are voting. It takes only one person to introduce an ordinance.
You. Next, please.
Next is urgency ordinance for introduction benefits executives.
Speaker, Barry Allen, 2 minutes.
I'm Barry Allen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council staff, and the public. Mr. Yusefian and Mr. Manoukian, yes, the numbers are there, the distribution isn't. And the distribution certainly could have an impact in the future based on increasing salary or increasing benefits by redistributing those numbers, and what will happen in the future as those numbers are added into the total mix, watching the percentages change. The other thing is that this is for the executives. Who are the executives? I know they're not covered by the any of the four city unions, but just who are the executives who are covered under 8B7? Thank you. Barry Allen.
Mr. Starbird, who are the executives?
I just want to note that those positions are all listed in the attachment to the ordinance, all of the positions that happen to be what we generally call the department managers, myself, and I think 17 other positions. Again, they're all listed in the ordinance and the report.
Thank you.
If I may, the benefit and cost increases for the executives is approximately $17,400.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody like to introduce the ordinance?
I'll introduce 8B7.
Thank you. What's next, please?
Next, 8C is City Attorney and Director of Planning regarding adoption of interim procedure to implement SB 1818 State Density Bonus Law. At 8C1 is urgency ordinance for introduction establishing an interim procedure for the review and approval of projects meeting the requirements of Government Code Section 65915, the State Density Bonus Law.
I have no cards on this.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question, and I would like to introduce the ordinance. One question I have in here is this is pretty self-explanatory. This is a law that is required by the state of California, and this has to do with the density bonus, and we have no say in it, basically, pretty much. My question was on the last section of the staff report, it talks about the affordability. And my question is, how long is the affordability? What is the timeline on this?
Mr. Garcia?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, and Mr. Yusefian, just to give you a little bit of background, there was a joint study session a couple months ago on affordable housing issues in general that was held with the council and the housing authority, and we had a brief discussion of the density bonus law. And with this interim ordinance, we're introducing this to sort of implement this procedure. And I can't answer any questions or walk through the mechanics of the law if you'd like. But to answer your specific question, for rental projects, the affordability term is 30 years. For for-sale projects, the initial purchaser has to be a moderate income purchaser. And then for a period of, I think, 10 years after that, there's an equity sharing that operates in a much similar fashion as the Housing Authority's own equity sharing program for its affordable home ownership program. So
okay.
Those are the two periods.
The reason I'm asking because it's nowhere in the in here,
Yeah.
and unfortunately I missed that meeting. I was not here, so I was relying on this, so I read it and I didn't see that. I'm just going to read a couple of sections. If my colleagues remember, a while back I was talking about the state of California trying to pass ordinances or laws that is going to basically mandate cities to do certain things, and this is a small section of that. He says, and this is a section that I want to read on the parking, and I hope Margaret is paying attention to this because I know she's going to be coming in here screaming, "Why are you doing this?" And on the parking, it says, an applicant whose project qualifies for a density bonus may, without actually requesting a density bonus, seek specific concessions with respect to parking. Okay, and these are what the parking requirements are. 0 to 1 bedroom, 1 on-site parking space. 2 to 3 bedrooms, 2 on-site parking place. 4 and more bedrooms, 2.5 parking spaces. These ratios are inclusive of handicapped and guest parking. That means there is not extra parking for handicap or guest parking. In addition, under SB 1818, on-site parking may be provided through tandem and uncovered parking by right. So while right now we don't allow some of these things, this is allowed by right. We have no say. The parking standards set forth in the law applies to all of the units in the project, not just the affordable units. So if you're building 100 units, and out of that 100 units you have 10 affordable, this parking standard does not apply to only that 10 that you're building as affordable. This parking standards apply to all 100 units.
And read the next sentence. That's the kicker.
Right.
The very last one.
The statute does not grant any discretion to cities and counties to deny the requested parking concessions. Basically, what the state is saying, hands off, cities. And I remember saying this when I was going to SCAG meetings. This was highly contested, and we went back and forth on HCD trying to get us more control, and we got some of it, but we lost most of it. Stay tuned for more coming in from the state that takes even more discretion away from us in a way of a new proposition that is out there that got the final sign that has to do with eminent domain. In there, the way the language is drawn, and I hope people vote against that when it's coming back, it basically says if a property, let's say a subdivision, can have by code 500 units, you cannot give him a right to build only 150. Because if you give him only 150,
Pay the difference.
you have to pay for the other 350 that he lost. That, under this new proposition that's going to be out there for people to vote on, will be considered to be a taking.
Okay, that's for another day. It's going to be a big day. Mr. Mnuchin would like to
Yes,
report.
I would like to report on this, actually.
You have a
Absolutely.
It's an
PowerPoint all
important issue.
prepared.
Okay, and we're prepared to give that. Mr. Kazakian, could you?
We're going to do PowerPoint on this? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, SB 1818 was adopted in 2004 and took effect in 2005 and amended the Government Code Section 65915. This provision was in place since 1979, but the amendments that took effect in 2005 drastically changed the law. The basic premise of the law, obviously, is increased density and other concessions and incentives in exchange for affordable housing, senior housing, and child care facilities. Just a
Slow
definition.
down.
Sure. I'm gonna.
Since I don't have a printout,
Oh, I'm sorry. There are printouts on the on. You should have one.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
The key term of density bonus is a percentage increase over the otherwise maximum allowable residential density under the city's land use element and zoning ordinance. The targeted housing groups for density bonus are very low income, lower income, moderate income, common interest developments, so it's basically condominium developments, and senior citizen housing developments, which is any senior citizen housing development that has 35 or more units restricted to senior citizens or qualified permanent residents.
Michael, say what AMI stands for.
Oh, I apologize. The percentages there are 50%, 80%, 100% of area median income. So those are the affordability thresholds for those categories. The amount of affordability or senior housing that triggers a requirement that a city grant a density bonus is if a project's, before you add on the density bonus units, the project's has a certain percentage of affordable units. So 10% for lower income, 5% for very low, 10% for moderate, and any senior development has 35 or more units. And a project must have 5 or more units to get a density bonus. And with respect to the amount of density bonus that a affordable housing development or senior housing development is entitled to, it's now on a sliding scale basis. That was one of the changes of SB 1818. The minimum density bonus is going to be 20% for lower income and very low income. And then for each percent you go over.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
I do have an example. Let me skip ahead to it, maybe.
Yeah.
If you had a particular property where the maximum density permitted by right is 100 units, and an applicant proposed to build 10 of those units for lower income households, that applicant would be entitled to a 20% bonus. And so the result would be 120.
10 affordable.
Right. You'd end up with 120.
12 affordable.
Correct. What was that?
Not 12 affordable.
Right,
but
10. You start with the base. Here's another example where you have same situation, but the income targeting is a little bit deeper, where 10 units are provided to very low income. Then you get the 20% plus the 2.5% for every percent you go over that 5%, and you'd end up with a 133 unit project, again, where 10 units are affordable to very low income households.
Well, there's a maximum of 35%.
There's a maximum of 35% density bonus. The next part of the density bonus law that was revised by SB 1818 has to do with what are called incentives or concessions. And these are basically a waiver or a reduction in site development standards, setbacks, height, lot coverage, anything that would restrict the ability to provide a housing development at the density that's allowed by the density bonus law. An applicant who requests a incentive or concession must also need a density bonus. That's the law. One thing, when we bring back the permanent ordinance, one item for consideration probably will be whether or not the city wants to require applicants to ask for a density bonus in addition to incentives, or to allow them to ask for incentives without having a density bonus. And that's a policy question that we'll leave for another day. Again, as with the density bonus, the amount of, or the number of concessions that are required to be granted by a city or county are based on a sliding scale. For lower income, 10, 20, or 30 will get you 1, 2, or 3 concessions.
What kind of concessions are there?
They can be anything having to do with our zoning code, any development standard. So it can be, there's a full list.
So concessions.
Concession is basically a regulatory concession, relief from a zoning standard.
So you're talking about the number of concessions?
Oh, I'm sorry. So an applicant will come in.
They have concessions from 3 of our laws, zoning laws?
Correct.
3 different laws?
Right.
And they're
3
required.
different. So if they come in with a very low-income project where 15% of the units are affordable, they can request 3 concessions, 1 from height, 1 from
Side setbacks, one from parking.
And parking is a separate issue. I'm going to get to
That's
that.
a
Separate
open
concession.
space.
Open space. Those are common.
How about sprinklers? How about landscaping? How about
Health
anything.
and safety, they can't.
Health and safety, they
Health
can't
and
ask for a concession on
Anything
that.
else, these 3 are required to be given.
If they ask, we're required to give them the specific ones they ask for?
There is some limited discretion with these incentives and
This is
concessions,
one
so I'll discuss in just a sec.
It's required that we give them 3,
Correct.
and now we have some discretion.
Which ones?
Which ones? Correct.
No, they could ask.
Yes.
It's not up to us to make that. They can ask what they want.
The way the process.
But we do have some discretion,
Not
which
if we wanna
ones,
grant
whether we agree with them or
We have to
not.
give them 3, but not necessarily
Let me-
3.
I don't think that's.
Let me get through this, and then I'll try to explain what the process works.
No,
It's
we
kind
want
of
to
a,
deal, no.
Now, on the concessions, are the fees part of it?
You mean development impact fees?
Yes.
No, because it's not a site or construction or development standard.
It's not a zoning
impact
thing.
fee.
Okay.
Although I know there are some.
I think there's some rules.
development
There's
community
some
saying that
laws
they're-
out there trying to even sidestep that.
For moderate income condo projects, 10, 20, or 30 will get you 1, 2, or 3 concessions. Here's the amount of discretion that the city has in denying the concessions. An applicant will come in and say, I need a density bonus, and I also want 2 concessions because I qualify for them. And the city can only deny the ones they request if they can show, based on substantial evidence, that those concessions are not necessary to provide the affordable units, or that the concessions will have a specific adverse impact to public health or safety or the physical environment. And this standard is written in a way that it's a high standard. It's not the traditional police power type of authority we have, general concerns about traffic or noise. We have to have some public...
I was going to say, I can make a public health or safety issue out of any of our zoning codes.
Right, but it's a really high standard. The way the code is written, it's so that they have to be based on written health or safety criteria that the city has in place at the time an applicant makes his or her application. Before I get to this, I would just say one of the things how I've seen this work is that when somebody comes in for an incentive or concession, the city, I think, has the discretion based on the 2 previous findings to say, well, you don't need these concessions to make your project pencil. You can get these 2. But there will be some give and take there. And in the event that the applicant can show that they need this particular concession to make their project not only pencil out, but physically fit onto a site, then they would be entitled to those. So it is a limited discretion. The next, and this is one of the aspects of the law that it's a bit quirky. There's these additional waivers and modifications. So in addition to the required number of incentives or concessions that an applicant is entitled to, if they can show that their project won't physically fit onto a site, even with the density bonus and with the other incentives or concessions, the city has limited discretion to deny those. Now, I will tell you, with these waivers and modifications, the burden is on the applicant to show the city or to prove to the city that they need them. So it's sort of a burden shifting. There's additional waivers, even above and beyond the first category of incentives and concessions that an applicant can ask for, but the city has significantly more latitude.
What are those concessions?
They're the same as the ones that they're the same categories. Any
Whatever
waiver
the
or
applicant
reduction in development
asks
standards.
for.
Was that?
Whatever the applicant asks for, pretty much.
Any waiver or reduction in the application development standards, yes.
Well, most of these things, I mean, I could see you could actually make any project fit the site if you waive the height requirement, because you may be confined by the sides,
Right.
and you may want to have the setbacks, but the guy will say, wait a second, if you want 100 units, I can't fit in this site because I have all these setbacks, so the only way you can go is up. There is no other way.
Right.
So you could do that. And if you do that, would he be able to come to you and say, but now you have increased my cost, and I won't be able to build this thing?
Because
how much latitude do these guys get?
They don't get. It's not unlimited latitude, especially on the second category. They really would have a high burden to show that they can't make this project pencil with what they're already getting under the density bonus and the first set of incentives and concessions. And the law is new, so there aren't a lot of examples of how it's been applied with these additional set of waivers and conditions. But my position would be, until a court case comes down, is that on the second category of waivers and modification, the city has significantly more latitude than it does with that first category.
Yeah, what mitigates against this in large part, especially in Southern California, is the cost of development and the cost of land, and what it takes to get a unit to an affordable level, especially very low. As we all know, we know what you have to subsidize a unit to produce. And so even with, and that's the complaint from the development community and why they continue to push for more and more incentives in SB 1818, is they will argue that even with these, it doesn't make sense for us to go there. Say we got relief on the height, but it's so expensive to build above 7 or 8 floors that it doesn't pencil for us, even if we're given this level of incentives here. That's why you haven't seen 1818 used in a lot of locations.
So at that point, are we required to come and say, okay, we'll give you $50,000 a unit?
No.
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 No. In fact, the law has a specific provision saying that the city is not required to provide direct financial assistance.
You can if you want to through your housing authority, but you're not obligated to.
But we're not obligated to go that
No.
far.
That's correct.
I think where it'll have a big impact is, for example, senior citizen housing. Providing senior citizen housing and getting the incentives that are provided. Well, we all know you can build at market senior citizen housing, can't you?
Correct.
So you can build at market senior citizen housing and still be able to get the incentives like the reduction in parking, which generally I think we tend to believe that you don't necessarily need the same level of parking that we require for units for seniors anyway. But
Actually,
you'll
I
see
think
it a lot.
yeah.
Yeah, you'll see it a lot in seniors development.
Our senior parking standards are actually less than what SB 18 allows,
okay.
so
Yeah.
it wouldn't have that much of an impact. Again, and this is waivers and modifications. In the second category, they're in addition to the first category, and the burden's on the applicant to show that they need them to make the project feasible. The parking concessions that Mr. Stephan has already spoken to, they're up there in a comparison to what the code requires, and this is generally because the code, for example, on efficiency units actually would require 2 spaces, but if it's a larger efficiency unit, it requires even more spaces. But again, you see for 0 to 1 bedrooms, there's a difference in 1 parking space per unit. For 3-bedroom units, there's a half space difference. For 4 or more bedrooms, there is a half space difference. And again, this is already, Mr. Stephan has spoken to this already. They apply to all the project's units. The parking ratios are inclusive of guest parking, and they can be provided by tandem or uncovered. Was that? Right. Going off the 100-unit example that we had previously, if you had a 100-unit density and a project got the 20-unit density bonus, and just assuming you had 60 0 and 1-bedroom units and 62 bedroom units, the difference in the parking requirements for what the code would require and what SB 18 would allow looks like this, because of the big difference between the 0, 1 bedrooms and also the guest parking.
There's a 90 parking spaces difference.
So, and again,
this is mandated. It's not
parking concessions are mandatory.
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 All those local council people that eventually end in Sacramento, they sure forget their roots.
Sure do.
It was, yeah.
Sure do.
It was overwhelmingly passed in both houses. Other features of the law, there's a density bonus for a land donation, which I haven't gotten into too much here, and I briefly touched on the report. But basically, if an applicant provides a land donation that would allow for the development of a certain amount of affordable housing to very low-income households.
I don't think that's going to happen. It says the land must be at least 1 acre.
Yeah, I know.
Good
That's the
luck
thing.
in Glendale finding 1 acre.
And there is an additional density bonus for the provision of a child care facility in conjunction with an affordable housing development. Just a
That? What is that?
What's the bonus?
I couldn't find that.
Basically, all it is it's a additional bonus that if an applicant builds an affordable housing project and also in conjunction with that, either adjacent to the site or as part of the site, builds a child care facility, the applicant is entitled to an additional density bonus in the amount of the square footage of the child care facility. I don't know how much of an impact that would have. I haven't heard of any
So it's 1,000 square foot, he can build another unit for 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's it.
It's not much of an incentive.
In summary, the 4 major aspects of SB 1818, density bonus, it's a mandatory approval. Incentives or concessions, there's a limited discretion, and that's that first category, for the city to deny the incentives or concessions requested by an applicant. That second category, what are called waivers and modifications in the statute. The burden's on the applicant to show that they need those. And then the parking concessions are also mandatory. As mentioned in the staff report, we are working on a ordinance to permanently modify the municipal code, and in part because the government code requires each jurisdiction to have an implementing ordinance, and that will define your administrative process, and it will also allow you to the extent allowed under the law to try to encourage preferred incentives. So the city has certain incentives that it would hope that an applicant would use over others, there's probably a way to draft an ordinance that does that. I know, for example, some jurisdictions have different levels of review for different types of incentives in hope that the ones that are most easily approved over the counter will encourage those applicants to seek those rather than something else that the council has placed a higher public policy goal in trying to maintain. And then the item before you tonight is an interim ordinance. As mentioned in the report, we do have applications currently pending that do qualify for, or at least meet the standards under the density bonus law. And we wanted to get something in place so that there is a mechanism to approve these administratively at this point until such time as we can bring back that code amendment. And my understanding was, I'm not sure if it's still the case, Elaine, but Tim was trying to get to the Planning Commission at the next meeting, maybe either the next one or the one after that, maybe.
I think we're going to go for August.
And it's an emergency ordinance because?
It's an urgency. We're proposing it as an urgency ordinance because we do have pending applications that are complete that have timelines that they need to get their approvals, and so there's one I think that's coming before the ZA in the next month. So, and then wherever the issue of economic feasibility is at issue, we have drafted the ordinance in such a way that the ZA, the zoning administrator, will have to consult with the Department of Community Development and Housing, our department, to address those issues. So that is, in a nutshell, SB 1818 and the proposed interim ordinance.
Mr. Najarian?
Question, Mike.
Yeah.
I know on the affordable housing that we've done in the city of Glendale, that the affordable housing that has gone up, or that's in the planning stages and design stages, the city is a big partner in those. Mm-hmm. We're spending our 20% set-aside money. Is there anything in this ordinance which declares it to be against public policy for us to negotiate with the developer not to request those extra incentives that he would otherwise be entitled to?
No, there isn't anything. And I think as a right of contract, we would always have that right. As when you're talking about the housing authority negotiating with developers for affordable housing projects, I would think we always have that right by contract to say, this is your project. You're building this regardless of what the law.
Do we foresee any of those projects getting off the ground without any city subsidy? Because I know we subsidize $150,000 a unit and up sometimes. I don't think that a density bonus and a parking exception is going to give them that cushion, make up for what the city would otherwise be participating in.
I know one of the proposed projects is a project that the Housing Authority has been in negotiations with. That's the one on San Fernando, the UCP project. My understanding, though, is that if they don't get a density bonus and the parking concessions, then they'll just apply for variances. And so we thought it's more appropriate for an affordable housing project to get the density bonuses and the concessions under the law than to make them go through variances where they don't necessarily qualify for variances.
Right. Okay. I do have one card now. Nancy Kent, 3 minutes.
I just had one question. My name is Nancy Kent. I'm a resident of Glendale. And as we're talking about senior housing and affordable housing, is there a period of time that it is to be dedicated for senior housing or affordable housing, like in perpetuity, or 50 years or 10 years or 20 years? Or does it depend on the individual project that is set? Thank you.
I apologize. I don't have the exact time period. And for a senior housing project, I believe it's 55 years. Mm-hmm. That's not per the density bonus laws, per the California Civil Code, which sets the rules for senior housing developments.
Well, according to the staff report and also you, if it's a rental, it's 30 years.
Those are for the for the affordable housing, it's 30.
For seniors, it's 55 years.
Okay.
So I remember that.
Somebody
The
want
only
to-
thing is for sale, we basically sometimes through a contract will covenant it to 30 years or 20 years or whatever. But on this one, it's designed, you sell it as affordable, and then when it's time for them to sell it, we get a certain percentage of it. There's some kind of a sharing of revenues. If I'm not
Basically, the way
mistaken.
it would work is if somebody purchases a moderate income unit that was sold under the density bonus law, and then that purchaser resells it, they would have to pay back the difference between the market price and the affordable price, plus a percentage of equity, which the percentage in the increase in the price, the market price, since the time they purchased it. And it's operated much like the way our ownership program operates, except that our program is a strict covenant for 5 years and then turns into an equity share.
Mr. Sturbert.
There was a question asked earlier about whether or not we were obligated to provide economic support or incentives for projects. The answer was no, we're not. But on the other hand, you're not precluded if indeed a developer walked in and wanted to provide affordable units and wanted bonuses or and some of the concessions that you felt were untenable, there'd be nothing to preclude us from negotiating a development agreement and potentially providing some subsidy of the affordable units in exchange for not claiming densities or concessions. So you can do that as well.
Thank you. Would anybody like to introduce the ordinance now?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce 8C1.
Thank you. What is next, please?
And Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Yusefian.
when you come back with the ordinance, could you please create a matrix? I think the matrix of how this works makes things much easier than the written format.
Okay. Of the report or the...
No, if you have 100, it's what these items are, concessions and so on and so
Sure.
forth, what the parking and all this stuff. Make life so much easier.
Probably go to the road and sell it.
Okay. 8D, please.
8D is City Attorney regarding acquisition of tax default properties. At 8D1, motion authorizing the city manager to submit to the County of Los Angeles a request to remove tax defaulted properties from the list of properties which have been noticed for sale in the city of Glendale.
Move 8D1.
Second.
Move second. Discussion. Roll call.
Council members Menuchyan?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Weaver?
Aye.
We just bought more hillside property.
Next, please.
9A, 9 is hearings, and at 9A, we have Director of Public Works regarding vacation of the alley northerly of Chevy Chase Drive and westerly of Glen Oaks Boulevard, part of Hotchkiss Subdivision, vacation case number 141V. At 9A1, resolution ordering the vacation. At 9A2, resolution adopting plan number 12-205.
And Mr. Sturbert, and somebody put up the screen, too.
Do we have cards?
Yes, we do.
That's to Elaine Wilkerson. Elaine?
Actually, to me.
I'm sorry, Steve Zern,
One card.
Public Works Director. Sorry, Steve.
Two cards.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the item before you is the vacation of an L-shaped alley that is northerly of Chevy Chase Drive and westerly of Glen Oaks Boulevard. In the course of the Public Works Department going through what is our routine evaluation of alleys for our alley improvement program, we noticed that this alley had changed in its use. It had serviced two properties, the rear of two properties that front Chevy Chase. Those two properties had changed in their demeanor and actually were proposing to change even further. There are also four upslope properties ascending from the one leg of the L shape to the alley that at that time would not be accessible. Those homes all lie on Lynn Glen and access from up there. We were approached by the Glendale Retirement Residents Limited Partnership to talk about the vacation of that alley in anticipation of a development for that corporation. They met with us, met with the planning department, and it was at that time that in their course of gathering information, there was a concern expressed by one of the, as I said, upslope residents that they had used that alley to access the slope portion of their property, below their property, for vegetation management, making sure that their irrigation and their landscape was taken care of, that there was no visual blight. It was at that time that GRR had proposed a landscape covenant and easement agreement that would essentially provide for all of the landscape and irrigation management of those slopes at no cost or obligation to the residents who own those slopes. And in that manner, they felt that the vacation could then go through. An additional concern was expressed that even with that easement agreement or that landscape covenant and easement agreement, that there was some desire on the part of a resident to still access the area and get to that slope. It was at that time that we added a condition that with reasonable notification, GRR would allow the residents to enter that area and access the slope. That's generally the situation that we're in today. There's been some question, I know. I believe there's probably speakers on this, but we have with us today Ms. Sansoni from the City Attorney's Office to go through the legal issues pertaining to the vacation. We also have Mr. Rodney Kahn representing GRR, who was the individual that was putting together the landscape covenant and easement agreement, to talk about how that process transpired and the various signatories to that particular agreement.
Okay, I have two cards. I'll listen to the public first. Okay, Ruth Bensley. 3 minutes, if you can. If you need more, let me know.
I'm sorry?
3 minutes. If you need more, let me know.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, staff. May it please the council, I am a homeowner on Ling Glen Drive in Glendale, 1516. Some time ago, the Glendale City Planning and Building Permit Department gave permission to the Southern California Council of Seventh-day Adventists to build a retirement facility on Chevy Chase Drive just below the hillside property and adjacent to the properties located on Ling Glen Drive. The proposed development would carry the new development directly to the property lines of our lots on Ling Glen, and including the alleyway in the proposed development. At the time those decisions in the Planning Division were made, we homeowners were under the impression that the public L-shaped alleyway from Chevy Chase Drive, making a right-hand angle turn below our properties, was already sold to the Adventists. Now that appears not to be the case. In that event, I feel that there should be advertised closed bids to be accepted on a prearranged date, to be opened publicly in the offices of the city, Glendale City Hall, to receive bids on that alley that the city has proposed to vacate. Thank you for your kind attention to me on this matter.
Thank you. Next speaker, Rodney Kahn.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Rodney Kahn, and my office is located at 1111 North Brand Boulevard, Suite 403 in the city of Glendale. As Mr. Zern pointed out, in terms of the adjacent property owners, I'm here this evening on behalf of the Seventh-day Adventist Church and also the Glendale Retirement Residence that's developing this project jointly. We took the opportunity on 4 separate occasions to meet with the adjacent property owners. One of the concerns that came up had to do with a privacy issue, not necessarily an alley issue, but a privacy issue. And so what we did was we went into an agreement, a landscape covenant agreement, that would take approximately 20 feet at the base of the lots where our 2 lots adjoin, and we would landscape whatever trees, whatever sizes, whatever shrubs would be planted there. We would provide. We'd also irrigate and maintain them as well. And then, as Mr. Zern pointed out, any time that any of the property owners wanted access to the rear of the property, we'd be happy to have them come to the property and allow them to do so. We did also, in terms of the project itself, we had spoken with different neighbors in different areas. The project has gone through the city processes. It has environmental that's been certified, its initial study. It also had design review, and there was a variance related to one item for the overall project. The retirement residence itself, just in a nutshell, is a typical resident is a person in their late 70s or 80s. It's independent living. They do provide for security, meals, housekeeping, things like that. That's what this 95-suite, 105-bed facility is proposing. If you have any questions, obviously I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll go sit down and wait your opinion.
I'm curious, why do you need a alley vacation? I mean, it's just an alley. Why the need to take it away from the city?
Mr. Quintero, in terms of the site itself, currently on the site is about 64 parking spaces. And those parking spaces are excess and above what the code requires for both the Seventh-day Adventist offices along with the bookstore, which is further west, as you see In terms of the alley itself was not being used. We were told, and from the Seventh-day Adventist Church has pointed out, they were using it very slightly and only to get access for the parking area. So in terms of the functionality of the alley, it wasn't serving any purpose. As you can also see from the section or cross-section that's been provided. No, it does not. No, it does not. And the difference in elevation is about 50 feet. So you're not providing, in terms of the access that would be provided, was only for basically the parking lot where we're developing the project on.
Mr. Mayor? We might also address the underlying fee or ownership of the property. City has an easement, but its underlying fee or ownership is vested.
The underlying fee is owned by the applicant,
Yeah.
So there's no need for a public bidding or anything like that.
Right, they own.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Correct.
So we're
So
bending
this
our
isn't an
easement.
alley where the city owns the underlying property. It's an alley where it was essentially required to be dedicated to the city from the adjoining commercial properties. And as happens in that case, if it's found to no longer have a need as an alley and it's vacated, it automatically goes back to those people who own the underlying property.
Any other comments?
You want to close the
I
hearing?
have a question, but we
Yeah,
can close the
I'll
hearing.
close the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Najarian?
So, Mr. Garcia, tell me about the potential of a claim of a prescriptive easement by these homeowners who use that alleyway openly, hostile, adverse,
Notorious.
There you go, Mr. Quintero. Couldn't they say, look, we've been using this, no one has stopped us? Obviously, I think they're more concerned about the privacy issue, but could they not use that? And would the city, should that claim be made, would the city be drawn into that in any manner?
I don't know, with respect to particular facts, whether they can make the case. As a general rule, a case for either adverse possession or prescriptive easement does not lie against a public agency. It's just a general rule of public policy that the cases have held it. There's no action for prescriptive easement against the
That's
city.
the twist, because it is public use, a
Right.
public way,
Right.
if you will. Now, but if it's going to be dedicated back, I mean, I see that as a potential issue that we need to maybe think about for.
Well,
keep in mind
one,
as
it
we
wouldn't,
make
it
our
would not,
decisions.
it wouldn't affect us. I mean, that would then be an issue between the two private property owners. But again, I don't think that any type of action for prescriptive easement could be taken in this case.
Anybody want to make a motion? Or
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would move 9A 1,
Second.
2.
moved in second?
Can they be moved together, or do we have to vacate it first before we can adopt a plan?
They're resolutions, so they could be taken at the same time.
Okay.
So the move is 9A 1 and 2, correct?
Yes.
Second? For further discussion, roll call, please.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
No.
Quintero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. What is next, please?
Just to be different, huh?
And 9B is Director of Planning regarding appeal of lot line adjustment at property locations 1376 Balmoral Drive and 1073 Trafalgar Drive. Case number PLLA 2005-003. And 9B1 motion denying lot line adjustment. And 9B2 motion approving lot line adjustment. At 9B3 motion initiating code amendment allowing the approval of lot line adjustments that do not increase the degree of nonconformity with local codes. 9B4 motion initiating code amendment prohibiting appeals of lot line adjustment determinations.
Okay, Ms. Sturbird, and the report, whoever's going to
Yes,
give it.
Mr. Mayor, before I go to Elaine Wilkerson, I think it would be appropriate to have our city attorney explain to you the nature of the action before you and the memo that he gave you this afternoon, clarifying what the staff report indicates is really a little discretion on the part of the city council on this matter and what that is.
It's exactly what I
Michael?
wanted before the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Starbird. The way that the MAP Act provision, Government Code Section 66412, and our code are written, this is a ministerial act. So if
Michael, I'm sorry. Explain what this act is.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Subdivision Map Act, dealing with parcel maps, tentative tract maps, and lot line adjustments. When you have a lot line adjustment application, if the application, the proposed lot line adjustment, including the resulting parcels, will comply with all laws, including zoning and building laws, the city must grant it. If it does not comply with all local zoning and building code, the city must deny it. And that's what we've concluded.
Ministerial.
It's a ministerial act, meaning
Meeting.
that it's opposite of discretionary. The city.
You don't think about it.
You
So
just you look at the rule, you apply the facts, and
I
that's
think
it.
the
There's
general
no.
public would have
So in this case, you have a lot line application for a lot line adjustment that falls into the latter category in which it does not comply with
Correct.
your local codes.
Uh,
And so even though it comes to you on a recommendation for approval from BZA, it doesn't comply.
And
So
we concur with staff that it doesn't comply with the minimum lot width standard, and therefore.
Explain at all what may have transpired at the BZA that they didn't. Were they aware of this, or was this just not totally covered?
It was explained initially. I was there at the meeting. We were asked, both our office and planning, what the city's discretion was, and we said it was a ministerial act. If it didn't comply with all local zoning codes, the city had to deny it, as the zoning administrator denied it. And I think, though, that Mr. Kraus can probably give a very cogent explanation of the particular code provisions at issue and why there may have been some confusion at BZA.
So it's all his fault?
No.
Yep, it's his.
I think what we can do is explain where there may have been some confusion as far as the applicability of the minimum lot width requirement.
Well, let me ask you another question, Mr. Mayor, if I may. You say this is a ministerial act, so you either have it or you don't. Approve, deny. Why didn't it get even appealed?
Our process.
Why was the appeal even accepted?
Because our code allows appeals of lot line adjustments, and that you'll notice that one of the suggestions
Okay,
is
and if our code allows lot line adjustments per our code, wouldn't that determine that there is a certain amount of discretion that is allowed? Because if it didn't, it basically would say that law just stays with the ZA, and that's it. She's basically God at that point. So
that may be the way the process.
just like the civil service commissions are. They're God. We can't appeal their decision. Nobody appeals their decisions to us.
I can't speak to why we have appeals for lot line adjustments. All I know is that we do, and we ask that each decision-making body for a lot line adjustment apply it in a ministerial way. And that you'll notice that's one of the items also before you is to consider whether you want to direct staff to look at a code amendment to do away with the appeals of these lot line adjustments again. Because we
I
have
was
the
on
process.
BZA, and we had a different lot line adjustment that came to us. And at that time, the ZA had approved the lot line adjustment. Then he came to us as an appeal from another organization, and we basically stuck with the ZA. And then he came to the city council, and I think Mr. Weaver was on the city council at the time, and he was the only one who voted against it. And the rest of them voted for it. If you remember that lot? Do you remember that?
No, on
Got that age
The one
thing
that
going
turned
again.
into
That age thing.
two lane, and you said no, it was John Gregg's property, one of them?
Oh, maybe that's the reason.
You remember that?
It's just, I had my reasons.
Right. But that's the whole thing to me that, and I watched that Board of Zoning Adjustment meeting, and I heard Mr. Krause's excuses, I heard your explanation, and I heard the Board of Zoning Adjustments conclusions, and I thought Mr. Devine made an incredibly a great way of putting things succinctly and making all of the findings. It's probably one of the best findings I've ever seen anywhere.
I think you should come up and do it again.
Well, he's here.
I know, that's why I
If
said
you have
that.
any questions,
Maybe
we
at
can
this
ask.
time be
Don't worry, his
time to
card's
start the
here.
hearing.
His card is there? Okay, fine.
But the point is, as I've asked the question 2 or 3 times in the last few days, we have no discretion.
You have no discretion as long as the lot line adjustment does not comply with the zoning code, which
Doesn't.
planning and city attorney's
76-foot
office
wide lot,
do not believe
less
it
than the
comply.
100 required. So our hands, I asked, then our hands are tied, right?
Well-
That's what I'm being told by our legal department.
I think that's where the issue of contention is, because I don't agree with their analysis on that. 100-foot is for a new subdivision. All these subdivisions have been done and built, and as the pictures will show, my question goes even further than all these lot line adjustments. You will see two houses there. Their pools are encroaching.
Of course.
The second one, even more so than the first one.
It's logical to make the adjustment.
And the question is, how the heck did they get a permit in the first
I
place?
asked the same questions.
Yeah,
But
how can they
the
build a
bottom
pool on
line
the
is
neighbor's property?
76, and the code requires 100.
Okay.
Ministerial, no choice.
So the
So
question
how-
will be, what do we do? He's going to tear out his...
No, they're going to file a parcel map. Then they can legally do it. I already asked the questions. They don't want to spend the money for a parcel map, but if they all combine, there's 4 lots involved, and if they all got paid a portion of the parcel map, they can legally do the whole thing. Because this is only going to take care of 2 lots. The guy next door is further out.
Right.
Well, they still have the same problem.
Oh, and I don't know what's happening with the rest of them because there were no
We
lines.
ought to
It didn't
just
show
follow
any of
them
that
because
stuff.
you got a steep bank there. Everything is in, nothing else is going to be built. Do a parcel
Right.
map and adjust them all, get them done. Mr. Najayan?
What is my liability as a councilman if I vote in violation of the government code?
Well,
Is it any personal liability?
Go straight to jail?
there are
Talk about
cases.
hands being tied, is that with figuratively or
I
literally?
mean, there are cases regarding city and individual liability for approval or denial of ministerial permits in violation of the law. And that's all I can tell you.
What does that mean? Do we
Well,
take-
if
do
basically
we take him to jail directly?
No, I
or?
was just saying the courts have found that if the city abuses its discretion in reviewing a ministerial permit, there is liability that attaches to the city.
That's all right. You can abstain, and I will vote for it, so I'll go to jail. Just make sure you put a little
I'll visit you.
little saw in the
file
cake.
in the cake,
A
okay.
file in the cake when you come
Mr.
visit me.
Starboard?
Michael, are there any adjustments to our code that could be made that would allow this kind of a lot line adjustment to be made?
I think so, and
Be
it's
in
in,
compliance.
the, it's in the staff report. One way to do it is to amend the code in such a way that lot line adjustments that do not increase nonconformities would be permitted, and that's what a number of jurisdictions
I already
do.
talked to staff on that, too. That is the case here today.
So, and that's presented as an option in the report
Can't do
too.
anything today.
After you've had a chance to hear this item, which I suggest you do.
The 100-foot is arbitrary, just like 7,500 square foot is an arbitrary number for an unbuildable lot.
Mr. Mayor, in response to that last question on the issue of what kind of code amendment would resolve this, I think staff would be quite pleased to have a little bit of flexibility in this section. And there was an amendment to the code some time ago to give that flexibility on the lot area, but it specifically was not given on lot width. And there may have been a reason at the time, but I'm not sure what that reason is today. If they're existing lots, I really cannot understand why that would be a
Let
problem.
me ask you another question.
Motion 3 before you.
If we were to pull this off calendar, give you time to make that little old adjustment in the code and bring it up to us, I mean, it's going to save the cost of doing a parcel map to the landowners, and
Then we can remand this.
then bring it up to us. Can we do that, Mr. Garcia?
I think our recommendation would still be for a denial, and then bring that process back and let the applicant reapply. Our concern is obviously Permit Streamlining Act, and the amount of time it takes to stay this and get the code amendment work in process. We run into problems with our permit streamlining requirements.
So,
Yeah, but the poor applicant has spent all this money, all this time, just because our codes are a little tricky. It's not the applicant's fault. So the applicant, this situation has stayed there for I don't know how many years, for at least 10 years. So another 6 months, it's not going to make a difference. So we could just take it off the calendar, let the staff come back with some modifications that we need to do to give certain amount of latitude, and then when that is done, adopt the ordinance. It takes place, then you reschedule this, and it comes back, and then we deal with this. Because, I mean, this is common sense solution to a problem.
I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, that if you're not willing to deny it, have them apply anew. At least you would ask if they are willing to offer a request for continuance, because really under the Permit Streamlining Act, we would be putting ourselves in an awkward position unless they were asking you to continue it, so that it would give us the opportunity to
Okay,
amend
I'm
the
missing
code.
something here. Instead of denial, we could ask.
No, they ask.
They
ask for
ask
continuance.
us. We put the words in their mouth, and they ask for continuance. We take it off calendar. We straighten this little glitch out, get an ordinance on the books, adopt it, and then we put it back on the calendar.
Mr. Mayor, if I may ask our city attorney a question.
Sure.
Most land use applications, you're supposed to make the decisions based on the rules in effect at the time the application is deemed complete. So would it be appropriate to even consider doing the
You
continuance?
have to throw a wrench in this whole thing.
This is normal land
Yeah, that's
use.
just generally the rule. However, I think
He's very good at that.
I
when the
know.
rule
I can
has
vouch
been
for that.
relaxed in a certain situation, you can apply.
Retroactively.
Well, not retroactively. You can apply the relaxed rule, so to speak. Again, though, I'm in agreement with Ms. Wilkerson that again it should be a denial and have them reapply. It's the
Cleaner way.
procedurally.
That's not what she said, though. She said you can
Well-
you can ask them to ask us to continue it.
Right, but I
The cleaner way is to have
If
a
they
denial,
Yeah,
but
I
if
think
you are not willing to do a denial
If they
tonight,
reapply
then you should ask
under the
them.
new ordinance, it goes to the zoning administrator. That's approved, and we never see it again. Right?
except
If
that
they
if you
apply again, then the rules would be changed.
The
It
rules
would
were
then
changed,
be
zoning administrator would say, okay,
such that she could approve it.
and it would never get to the BZA or to the council.
That is quite likely.
And what was the cost of lot line adjustment application?
Mr. Garcia, while she's
While she's
looking.
looking.
$1,063 effective September 5th,
Lot more than historic district.
2005.
That's the
Yeah.
So
Changing those?
this is,
And it's going to
we
go
haven't
up.
changed it yet.
Haven't changed
We haven't
it.
changed it yet.
And if the different parties, the two parties shared the cost, 500 or something,
Or we can waive it.
or we can waive it.
Well,
Yeah. Or if you
Can't-
split it
Don't really
four
have-
ways, if they come back with
Can't
all
really
four
waive
lots that are really affected, they would be splitting it four ways. Because you can have up to four
For
lots
applicants.
participate.
That would be a cleaner approach too,
That's
because you,
$250 apiece, and you're done.
That would
yes.
yeah.
make a lot of sense.
I haven't opened the public hearing yet. Mr. Najarian.
This is a great case if you're an attorney.
Well, you are.
And I'd like to know if the applicant has sought any legal redress. I'd like to know if they've gone against their title insurance company for a claim for their title insurance. And most of all, I would like to know how this happened. I really want to report on this.
All over the city.
This is,
I mean, how the pools were constructed and
how'd the
everything.
pool get constructed that way? I mean, there may be liability against the owner if he did it without permit.
Believe me, it's not.
There may be liability against the city if we gave it the okay. These things, in my mind, would make a difference as to how I'm going
We
to.
could bring that back. My understanding from the last
Permits
hearing
have
was
been
that
issued.
permits were issued, and but the
For the subject swimming pool, but
Yeah.
not the deck, not the raised wooden deck.
Yeah,
And
but-
there is also a swimming
How
pool.
about this one?
Yeah, there's a permit for the pool, but I couldn't find one for the gazebo.
Well, I mean, look at this pool.
Who gave the permit
Within
for
a,
the pool?
I mean, 2/3 of this
Forget the
pool is
gazebo.
in somebody else's lot.
No doubt about
the
it.
pool built in accordance with the permit.
Who's the
Well,
builder?
there's no plans left. You're talking late 80s when
Say
the
who's the builder?
Who's the builder?
Actually, if I can clarify this, what often happens is the plan comes in, it's a very rough drawing. It shows the pool on the private property, and it looks fine. We stamp it off when it gets built. They don't survey where the lines were.
I mean, this is wrong. If this guy has projects before the city again, I want to know this. I mean,
Well,
this is terrible. I feel very bad for what
I
happened.
think it was private
We're
ownership.
in a tough situation here. We're talking about amending our codes and bending our codes and making exceptions. Someone has to pay for this. Really, I'm ticked off about this.
I think it's the owners before, like so many other owners.
Well, who are they? I
They're
want
not-
names.
Jeez, you're
No, this is terrible. I'm really upset.
The
about
previous
this.
landowners that owned it before these people brought the properties, there was 2 land changes. The people before probably just went out and did it with no permits, not asking, oh, I don't need a permit for this, and they put it
I
in.
want to know who.
And then these
Who's the
people
builder?
buy, not knowing that
contractor?
everything wasn't permitted.
Clearly, these folks who bought it after the fact are the
Who
victims.
permitted it in the city?
Well, that was my
How-
main question to
How
staff.
could they permit it in
How
the city?
could the staff have issued a permit for a pool
In someone
that
else's
clearly was on
property?
somebody else's property?
As I said, the sketch that's submitted by the applicant shows the pool undoubtedly on their property, and because they don't do a full survey for these pools, and they don't necessarily survey the back lot line and make sure they have it all in, you find it's quite a common thing, undesirable, obviously, and inappropriate.
Quite a common
But
thing.
this is not the only pool or the only 2 pools
But
in
it's
the city.
wrong.
It is wrong. It
And
is
we gotta draw the
absolutely
line
wrong.
here,
If
and
you-
we gotta
if you walk
find
out-
out what happened, who did it, and take action on
Yes,
it.
sir. Yes, sir. But if you walk, you
Boy, he's out.
Mr. Attorney,
Did
if you
somebody
walk
give him
out,
some
if
sugar?
you walk out on a lot and then you look down the hill, way down below this slope is another house. You figure all that land up there is yours, right out to the precipice at least.
Figure that.
But
I mean, these
the
are
way the lots
professionals
were
we're
drawn
dealing
in the
with,
past,
engineers and
the
what-
lot line was drawn at the top of the slope, and you wouldn't expect that.
Two things.
We'll get that
Especially in the era in which these homes were developed, it wasn't uncommon not to conform the parcel maps to the grading. You approve a subdivision on a piece of paper, and then the lots go in, and you don't go back to conform the lines of the subdivision with the lay of the land once the lots are graded. I happen to have moved out of a subdivision where that very problem occurred, and the homes were built in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And the entire subdivision had problems because the lots and the slopes were different than the lines. Now, that community since changed its procedures, and there had to be a conformance after the grading was completed. The other question is, and I don't think we may now, I don't think we did then, I don't think we do today, but requiring surveys for installing a pool. I mean, the owner assumes the responsibility when they come in and give us a plan that it's on their property.
About the pools that are built underneath power lines, and they don't show the power lines on the drawing.
Once again, we don't require someone to go survey their property to get a permit for a pool. Now, it might be smart if they did. If they were smart, they might before they invested that kind of money, but we don't require they do it. You'd probably be well over $1,000 for a survey, and we don't require you do it for something like a pool permit.
Well, last week, we had an engineer who underestimated the angle of the slope, and we're not requiring that either, so nothing's changed for these days.
Oh, the engineers get slammed tonight. Oh, well. Engineers do make mistakes.
In the end of the day,
Last
Mr.
Big
Mayor,
Kettle had a problem with it.
in the end of the day, regardless of whose fault it is, regardless of who built it and which terrible contractor pulled a fast one, there are 2 houses right now that have improvements that are encroaching on other people's
Right.
properties.
So,
Now,
we haven't heard from the public yet.
and the thing is that I think my colleague in here, the astute attorney, was talking about prescriptive easements. Well, gee, this thing has been there for the last 10 years. Does he have prescriptive easements on that? So, I mean, and I don't know how long the pool has been there, maybe how many years of prescriptive easements. So, end of the day, I mean, you look at this picture, doesn't take a rocket scientist. You look at that and you go, house here, house on the top, the property for this house goes all the way up here. All this vacant land he can't use unless there's a goat that can travel all the way up in here. You can't use.
Well, we have goats
so
that
if this
do that.
line is drawn down in here, nobody gets hurt. Problem solved.
We all know that, Mr. Seven. How do we get there? That's the problem.
And that's my point, you know.
We got 4 cards. How about we open the public hearing?
Let's hear from the people.
way-
Maybe they
I
can
guess you've heard
shed
where
some
we're
light.
going with all the thinking. Mainly, I guess the
Mr. Mayor,
primary
did you want me
option,
to do
deny
the
it.
brief PowerPoint first or not?
No,
Okay.
if after we need it, we'll,
Mayor, it may be useful to have them put the map
The
up
map, just-
on the,
okay, put the map on, then let's get on with the public hearing. It's 5 minutes to 9 again.
Mr. City Clerk. Thank you.
Got an easement. They've been encroaching.
I'll leave it on that one.
Okay.
They probably paid taxes on
And
it.
you can put that one on TV occasionally, so the people know.
Probably paying something.
Back and forth. Okay, I'll open the public hearing. First speaker, Sako Marcusi. Is 3 minutes enough, or do you need more?
we should have the
Oh,
lights on.
try 3 if you need more. No problem.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Weaver, members of the council and city staff. My name is Sako Marcusi. I've been involved with this project for the past 2 years. Simply, Mr. and Mrs. Lamb came to me, asked me to remodel, designing a house to remodel. Actually,
Which one?
Remodel their house. And I asked for a proper ALTA survey before starting the job. Believe
This
it
is
or
what
not,
happens
you know.
when you ask for a survey. You ask for a survey, that's how you got into trouble.
Which house is it?
The one which is crosshatched right there on the.
Okay.
So when the survey was done, well, it revealed all the inconsistencies, that the pool deck and a wooden deck were projecting into the neighbor to the south anywhere from 2.5 feet to 14.5 feet.
Holding the top of slope line.
Yes. And, well, we consulted our civil engineer, and we,
Engineering.
we thought, lot line adjustments are in the books, and we'll go ahead and proceed with lot line adjustments. And we submitted for lot line adjustments, knowing that the city planning and the staff will work with us to create conditions or provide mitigation measures to go through this lot line adjustment, because after all, that's what the ordinance says. It specifically says that after investigation and receipt of reports of other divisions or affected outside agencies, the zoning administrator shall approve the lot line adjustment, provided it is found in writing that the proposed lot line adjustment conforms to the local zoning and building ordinances, and goes on and so on. But my emphasis is on shall and what the city ordinances provide for lot line adjustment. In one section of the Chapter 16, in the design standards for subdivisions, enumerate several items as to where the lot line should be and how big the lot and how it should be designed, graded, and so on and so forth. And in the Chapter 30 are exemptions. Under exemption says that the lot line, when it comes to the lot area, lot line adjustments are exempt for properties in R1R, which are more than 7,500 square feet. And at the same time, when you do make the lot line adjustment, you do not create new lots and you do not reduce the existing lots to less than 12,000 square feet. So all these, there are some inconsistencies in the code, but also there are provisions that will allow you to go through a lot line adjustment. I'm sorry, could I just take a couple?
No, go on.
So I think it's only logical. This is not the only property in Glendale that has issues with lot line.
Better believe that.
I bet we have over 80% of our residential lots are less than 100-foot frontage, so automatically they are right out the door. They don't qualify.
There you go.
And in addition to that, if there are 30,000, 40,000 homes in the city of Glendale, maybe at least 15,000, 20,000 of them have some type of lot line issues, encroachments. My house, I have a fence which was built, I bought 1947, that was built 1947. There's a fence that half of it is on my property, half of it on the neighbor's.
You
It's a
mean
block
you
wall.
got the same kind of problem?
If somebody wants to raise issues and go after, as Mr. Najarian said, go after legally, try to be. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of cases like this.
Well, doesn't that beg the reason for getting the
And
flexibility into the
Definitely, and
ordinance?
that's what I'm saying. I was glad to hear that you were offering us as applicants to ask for a continuance for that, so that the planning department would come up with some means of revamping the code, that section of the code, so properties and people that have this type of issues with their lots, lot lines, can go through a relatively short time period and less costlier procedure to bring their non-conforming and illegal structures in conformance with our codes.
Would your clients accept a denial with the ability to reapply, maybe at no cost, after the ordinance is straightened out?
I have not discussed that with my clients,
Are
but
they coming up to speak?
yeah, I can ask them to come up to speak. Mr. Lamb?
Wait.
I'm sorry.
Hold on.
You said this whole issue came up when you wanted to do a remodel of the house?
Yes.
What do your clients really want to do? I mean, you noticed this and you said, we better fix this.
Is that
Yes.
right? Fred Lamb? Is that
Yes, Mr. Fred Lamb, yes.
Have you explored the possibility of obtaining an easement from the property below, which would give you rights to use that land? The only thing it would not give you is a fee ownership.
That's true. That's correct. Even that would solve, but the reality is that the structures are still there in an easement, and in a transfer of title, that is a questionable issue.
Another negative.
Yes, it is another.
Plus, I think
If somebody wants to buy
the bigger thing is the ordinance itself. I mean, his house, and I don't know how many others, probably on mine, because on my house, the lot line is, I think, somewhere in the mid of the slope going up. Well, I end up having to take care of all that slope. I mean, part of my little waterfalls on it, so I'm illegal.
Yes, those are 5, yeah.
So it's so many thousand homes probably have these just by the nature of the creation of a lot. That just changing the ordinance is the way to go, rather than talking about easements and other things.
What does the other property owner have
I have
to?
my copy.
What does the other property owner have to say? Is he willing to deed part of the property over to the Lambs?
Oh, definitely. The other property owner, which is on Trafalgar Road, we had lengthy. Goes back over a year now. We had several meetings with my client, and they agreed to depart with the part of with some fee on, and we went through a title. We went through an escrow, and it's been going on for months and months now. We're just waiting for a result from city planning.
That landowner down below has to maintain that slope.
True.
Suitable to the fire department.
Yes.
The whole slope up. So why wouldn't they want to get rid of some of that slope?
Exactly. That was brought in the discussion too, which all of us agreed that was a lot easier for the property upslope to maintain part of a slope than people down here going all the way up to the top
Especially
of the slope.
since they got a pool and a deck on it.
Because actually what they do is sometimes they ask the owners to the above the slope for their landscape people to go down the slope because it's easier from. So that's an issue. But what I distributed some photos that the only thing that did not have a permit on this property was the deck, the wooden deck, which is elevated. That's anywhere from 6 to 8.5 feet wide and some 38.5 feet long. And that was after the BZA's hearing. I suggested my clients to take down the deck.
Is that a cantilever deck?
No, actually, it was on the stilts, and it's just 4x4 posts. Yeah.
Just seems so wrong to have to take it down.
And I asked them to take it down because, after all, the larger project in the planning was to landscape, in the landscaping plan would terrace that deck so that it's not that elevated and it would be on grade actually. So we were planning.
So it looked better?
Yes, a lot better, yes. Rather than having a 10-foot high wooden deck which was projecting above the slope, you won't see that anymore. All you see is the guardrail. Yeah.
Well, that's a nice independent one, but I still like to see the code fixed up. I guess we asked the owner if he'd be interested in letting us deny and then come back when we correct the ordinance. We asked him that.
I could definitely ask them.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Yusefian?
I have a question as far as the code is concerned. Part of the staff report and also part of the condition of the BZA is that the zoning requirements that you have a 10-foot setback from the pool. So you have to have a 10-foot setback in that R1R zone. Now, the way the picture shows where the property line is, the pool is right at the property line. And the amount in here that you have added, this little area, this does not add to 10 feet. So part of the conditions was for this to be 10 feet. So if that became a 10-foot, which means you come down a little bit more into that slope, would the people down in Trafalgar have any problem with that?
No,
Create
Mr. Mayor,
that-
Mr. Yusefian, actually, if you refer to your Exhibit D, under interior setback, general exemptions and additional exemptions, in ROS and R1R zones, actual retaining walls under 3 feet in height may be located anywhere within the interior setback areas. Retaining walls at least 3 feet, but not over 8 feet in height, or invisible height, I guess above grade, may be located no closer than 5 feet to any interior property
I'm not
lines.
talking about the retaining wall.
I'm talking about also the
pool.
The pools also can be within 3 feet of the property line. Under paragraph F says, swimming pools and spas shall be set back a minimum of 3 feet from any interior property line, such distance being measured to the edge of the water. So actually, you're talking about the measurement of 3 feet from edge of the water. Right now, what we're proposing, after removal of that wood deck, will have setbacks in excess of 5 feet minimum from the edge of our existing structures.
Would it be safe to say that those details could be worked out when you come in for the lot line adjustment?
Well, this is one of the items that the
Yes.
staff turned it down, and it's number 2, which says, one of the 2 proposed new property lines will only be located 2.5 feet from the existing deck. The minimum interior setback requirements for this situation is 10 feet.
So they could adjust it further.
Which is not correct, based on what he just read.
There's a difference between the pool and the deck. The deck does not have a permit. The original application wanted to maintain the deck, so you'd have to get the permit, you'd have to maintain a 10-foot setback from the deck. The swimming pool itself, which is a little farther in, only needs to maintain the 3-foot setback. It was at the BZA, they said, well, we'll offer to eliminate the deck.
And if
Just like
they
Aaron
eliminate
said.
the deck, would they be fine with this lot lines that they show?
As long as it's 3 feet from the pool, an in-ground pool, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you have a large slope there. You can adjust that lot line any way you want.
Yeah, you could go either way, either 10 feet from that deck or a new deck.
Well, I'm
You
trying to
could do
get
some
back to the
retaining
issue
walls.
here tonight. We have a ministerial position where our hands are tied. And we've talked about options in order to allow this to proceed.
Our hands are tied if they don't meet the zoning codes.
And they don't. The
Well,
street
you
has to
said-
be 100-foot.
No, that, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Manukian, that can be conditioned. What can't be conditioned is the lot width. So there's no way you can
76.
resolve that.
So what I'm trying to find out from the landowner, if we vote for the denial, we clean up the ordinance, he comes back, and we tell him, okay, we'll either waive the fee or split it 4 ways or whatever. And that revised ordinance will affect every lot in the city in that condition. It's not, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
You have another appeal pending, and those people are in the process of filing a parcel map rather than proceeding with the appeal
Okay,
at this time.
How much
I'll be
does
willing
it
to
cost
bet-
to do a parcel map?
I'd be willing to bet there's thousands in the
little bit
same
more.
condition.
Yeah. Cost a little bit more in outside city. I mean, the surveyor, the engineer doing the work is going to charge a little bit more.
Parcel map
I'm trying.
is $5,657 plus $279 for every lot. It's much more
It's a
expensive.
little bit more than a little expensive. It's like $5,000.
Very expensive compared to lot
Can we
line adjustment.
possibly get through the other speakers, please?
Yes.
Okay, Fred Lamb, You're the owner. What's got the problem?
Mr. Mayor and
Your name for the record.
My name is Fred Lam. I'm a homeowner, 1376 Balmoral in Glendale.
Everybody
also
knows where it
applicant for lot line adjustment. I bought this house 1989, approximately 18 years ago, and we been lived there for so many years. We did not know anything. It's not it's not legal or whatever until I meet
Your friendly architect.
Taco, and then he advised me to get the land surveyor engineering, and then we found out that the deck is is over the property line. So we tried to work very hard with my neighbor in Trafalgar. We came to an agreement already in the escrow, reasonable sum of money to make the property line adjustment by 13 feet times 100 feet, like 1,300. We try to make everything legalized and try to make it better and comply with the city code. So we have submit application. I think it's more than 1 year, and has been denied at the first time, and we have appeal.
We know the history.
We have been approved one time, and
what do you think based on what you've heard?
well, I talked to Mr. Cross, and he invited me to his office and see the picture from the computer, and give me advice for the parcel map. But I believe the parcel map is kind of very complicated, because it's not only my property line with my connecting neighbor, is also the other neighbor, which I believe is very complicated and very costly and takes a lot of time. For me, I would prefer the small footage, over the line, because I already have a lot of negotiate with my neighbor in Trafalgar. We already have an agreement.
So if you do that,
Yeah.
if we sit here and deny you,
Yeah.
then we go out and we correct the code, and then you reapply back, you now are not in violation of the 100-foot width. It'll be a variable. As long as it says that the conditions, you're not changing the conditions by the adjustment, and you've already got into escrow, you'll own the land,
Yes.
and you won't be in violation. We'll
It
never,
takes a little extra time.
we'll never see you again. The zoning administrator
That's
will
what
approve
I
it.
hope, to do it.
Are you willing to go that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we talk about my neighbor, in the property below. They lately came to me for ask my permission to enter my property to clean up the slope because of the fire regulation. I allow them every year. So if they the lot line adjustment, I would take care the slope, and I believe we make it better. Yeah.
I agree. They still probably come on your lot to go down slope with the ropes. Yes. Go ahead, turn the thing.
I think the answer is yes. We would agree on denial, only upon condition that the same application would be brought back to the city planning, not involving any other properties, because that might trigger. It's a chain reaction, because if we involve some other property, they have problems with their neighbors, and they would come into picture.
Does staff have a problem with that? You're shaking your head
Also
no.
waive the fee.
Well, I think the ideal situation would be to include the other lot, but on a lot line adjustment, we can do this one, and then the neighbor will have to apply for a separate
Well,
one.
we now know the neighbors are illegal, right?
I think the problem is really that ideally, staff would always prefer to get this all cleaned up in one shot. And if they can try to speak to their neighbors, they may find that they'll come in and they'll all do it together, and it'll be finished. But if I can understand if they're not cooperative,
If you
we
leave it
should
with the option,
put
they
them
can do
through
it
this.
alone, but if they can work it out with the neighbors, they all come in, that takes care of 4 lots out of about 20, 30,000. got a
The
problem.
problem with only coming back with the two lots is the lower lot is just as much of an applicant as the upper lot. So then the lower lot still has code violations.
Well, but I want this gentleman. He's
Yeah,
worked,
the one-
he's
this is
gone
a
into
two-lot
escrow.
parcel.
He's worked out a deal with the property owner on Trafalgar. I think we need to make it as easy as possible to get this done. Then that lower lot, you say, also has issues with the adjoining
With the
property.
adjoining,
Then
right.
let him take care of it.
Right.
But I mean, this gentleman needs to. He's been at it for a year, maybe even longer. He needs to be taken care of, and that's it. And then
He's trying to do the right thing, and
Yeah.
our codes won't allow it. So.
Oh, the attorney wants to speak. Mr. Najarian?
I just want to say, I don't want to give any guarantee that if there's an ordinance change, that I'm necessarily going to vote for it.
Okay.
I think that there are private remedies to resolve this situation, which would not involve the city at all, by way of easement, by way of adverse possession. There's several other ways that this can be done. I'm very reluctant to be messing around with our ordinances just to suit a particular case that's before us.
And I'm not looking to settle a particular case. I'm looking at a code adjustment for the entire city.
Well, that's a pretty big, tall item that we need
It's
to look
one,
into.
it's changing 100 foot to variable based on it's not changing the conditions of the existing structures, whatever. All right, you got the magic words, it's one or two
Would,
sentences.
we would bring back something that would institute change only when the nonconformity is not made worse. And what we'll do is we'll look at other cities that have done this kind of provision in the state, because I understand there are quite a few, and we'll do a little bit of work. So this isn't going to come back to you in a month. It's going to take us a little while, but I think we all understand that we want to get this resolved. I think Wolf's concern is that the code says that both lots are supposed to comply with all codes, and that includes the building code. And the one lot, the Trafalgar lot, will in fact have an existing nonconformity that's been permitted.
Because
And
of
I'm
the
not
neighbor?
because their neighbor, your neighbor, has a pool also on his lot. I'm not sure, because that was permitted, if it's considered to be a noncompliance with the code, because it would be a stop. And I think Mr. Garcia is going to have a look at that. But my concern would be that we should try very much to get the two neighbors and the two pools resolved in one application. And Mr. Marcucci has heard this, and it would be simpler. We won't have to deal with anything else, and they should try. And there would only be one fee, so there's no real loss here, other than the neighbor on Trafalgar has to come to an agreement with your neighbor. But it would seem to me that the owner of Trafalgar should want to clear his title. And so he would be, or he or she would be a willing participant. But that's something Mr. Marcucci and I can
This
pursue
seems like a
another time.
no-brainer. Forget-
We don't have to work that all
Let the
through
book
tonight,
say-
but we'll do our best.
The lot line ought to be withdrawn, ought to be redrawn. So, thank you. We hear what you say. Two more speakers. Now we hear from the BZA. Pros and the cons. Annette?
I don't know if there was any cons.
3 minutes.
It was like 5-0 vote.
No, Art Devine is next, and he opposed.
No,
Or he was the other way.
It was a 5-0 vote.
Was it a 5-0? I thought it was 4-1.
5-0.
Sorry, Art. You're going to hear two of the pros.
Good evening. My name is Annette Ohanjanian with the Board of Zoning Appeals. On April 17, 2006, the board heard this lot line adjustment case and approved the adjustment request. Initially, based on review of the file for the BZA, I was going to deny the request because the review of the file indicated that the lot line adjustment request was ministerial and there was no discretionary review, so I felt that I had no discretion as a board member to review it, and the alternative for them would be to apply for a parcel map application, because then there would be discretionary review. However, Mr. Devine brought to the attention of the board the section 16.44.010 and based on the interpretation that was provided at the BZA, that would allow the board for a discretionary review and approval of the lot line adjustment subject to some conditions
What was
necessary.
that code section again?
Excuse me?
The code section, what was it again?
Yes. 16.44.010.
Okay. All right, go ahead. We'll ask for interpretation again.
So the interpretation that was provided at the BZA was that discretionary review for us would be allowed based on conditions, subject to conditions necessary to conform to the zoning ordinances. And according to the interpretation that was provided, the board voted for granting the request. So today, I'm not sure what the proper interpretation of this code section is. If the interpretation that was applied back at the BZA was improper, then we did not have the discretion to allow the adjustment, and it was ministerial. But if the interpretation that was provided was proper, and we did have a discretion to review it, then I would concur with our decision at the BZA. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Art Devine, the genius that came up with the, he's an engineer too, you know.
Thank you.
That's supposed to be a joke.
Mayor Weaver, council members, my name is Art Devine, and I too am a member of the Board of Zoning Appeals. I've heard a lot of interesting discussion tonight. I think what I plan to say is really a moot point now, because it sounds like you're heading in what I believe is truly the correct direction. That's to postpone it or continue it or deny it, whatever you want to do, and let planning do the code adjustment and have him come back and reapply. There's just one caution I would have in that scenario would be looking at just one item. That would be the lot width. And the code adjustments that Ms. Wilkerson would be looking at would be to take care of that lot width problem. As you probably read in your staff report, there are 3 other items that cause the planning staff to deny the request, and those would not be addressed in this code change. So it would be kind of misleading to think that they could just do the lot width change in the code and have a free time to get it approved. I can go over those things if you want, but as I say, it's kind of a moot point now.
Why don't you go over them?
Just a head shake. Do you understand what those other conditions are? The denial? I'm just asking, do you all understand? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll get into those in just a minute. Ms. Olanjanian mentioned or talked about the discretionary powers that the BZA had or didn't have, and there was quite a bit of discussion. We had Mr. Garcia there that helped us with it, and I think some of the board members were confused as to whether or not we did have discretionary power to rule on this. And according to Annette's interpretation, she concluded, based on what she just said here, that we did have the discretionary power. It was my understanding, and I think the understanding of the other 3 board members, that we had no discretionary power in granting this. And in making my presentation to the board, I wasn't looking at a discretionary power, because I knew we couldn't do that. What I was looking at was simply the fact that I did not believe Section 1620, which talks about the lot width, applied to this case, because in reading the beginning of it, it talks about it applying to new subdivisions or parcel maps, neither of which applied here. So I wasn't taking a discretionary action or view in it. I was saying it just didn't apply. And that was the basis of my presentation to the board. One other thing I wanted to mention on that, again, we were all kind of trying to figure out the best way to go on this. And after I completed my presentation to the board, one of the board members turned to Mr. Garcia and asked, do you agree with Mr. Devine's statements and position on that? And he gave he indicated that basically what he just said here, that if it's not a discretionary action, the board can rule on it. Another board member then turned to the zoning administrator who was sitting there and asked point blank, do you agree with the premise that Mr. Devine is presenting that Section 1620 does not apply to this case because it's not a new subdivision and because it's not a parcel map? And the zoning administrator said unequivocally that she agreed with and concurred with that premise. And again, that reinforced my feeling, and apparently the rest of the board members, in the thinking that it didn't apply, therefore it was not a discretionary action, and we could go ahead and grant the lot line adjustment. Again, that dealt with just the width of the lot.
That was not ministerial.
It was not ministerial. No, that it was not, that it was ministerial, that it was not discretionary.
Okay, okay.
So we had the word and the concurrence of the zoning administrator saying that she agreed with that premise, and we felt that that was the way to go. The other three items, if you want me to get into it.
Briefly.
The first one dealt, and we talked about it, or you talked about it earlier, was the deck clearance. And the zoning administrator, actually Mr. Kraus, in writing the report, indicated that would be a problem. And as it turned out, the owner has agreed to remove the deck, so it became, again, a moot point, and we felt that that was not a decision that had to be made anymore. The other item was the location of the property line on the slope. Again, in Section 1620, I think .170, it says that in development of new subdivisions,
He knows it by heart now.
He's learning.
it's generally, I forget the exact wording, but it's generally required that the property line be at the top of the slope. And the zoning administrator said, well, in this case, they're having to move the property line down to a location on the slope rather than the top. Therefore, it doesn't comply, again, with this particular section. However, in reading further in that section, in the same paragraph, it says that if the homeowner association has control over maintenance of the slope, then the property line may be located anywhere on the slope. And we got testimony from Mr. Marcucci and Mr. Lamb that the homeowner association does, in fact, have control over the maintenance of the slope, so that became a non-issue. And to further reinforce that, because the board wanted to make sure we were on sound ground, we put an additional condition on there that if this homeowner association agreement didn't cover all of the requirements in dealing with the maintenance of the slope, that they would record an agreement between the two owners indicating which owner would be responsible for what on that. So the BZA was very careful in making sure that that provision of the location of the property line on the slope was accounted for. And again, we did not believe that was a discretionary action. It was just a condition put on the approval of the lot line adjustment, which Section 1644 gives this board, this council, any other agency the ability to do. We can condition the approval of a lot line adjustment. That does not constitute a discretionary action, and correct me wrong if I'm wrong, Mr. Garcia. Is that a correct statement? The conditioning
The condition,
of,
yeah, the code reads that way, that either it complies with code or it's conditioned in such a way that it complies with code. And I think, again, with that one particular code requirement is not as problematic as the minimum lot width requirement, which this site cannot be conditioned to comply with that requirement.
Well, and that's...
Let him, there's one more issue.
The last item dealt with the swimming pool and gazebo encroachment from the property to the west of the subject property that does, in fact, encroach on the lower property. And the board looked at that, and we weren't really convinced that that encroachment, that there was any evidence or testimony showing that that encroachment did, in fact, cause the subject properties to not conform with the local zoning ordinances and laws. And when we asked staff about that during their presentation, as far as I'm concerned, we weren't presented with any evidence to show that that, in fact, does create an illegal condition on one of the subject properties. And we felt that if that was a problem with either the lower owner or the owner adjacent to Mr. Lamb, that could be something that would be discussed or handled through another lot line adjustment, as Ms. Wilkerson indicated. So those were the three items: the deck encroachment, which is a non-issue now because they're going to demolish it; the location of the slope, or the property line on the slope, which went away because it was conditioned, as we're allowed to do by Section 44. And finally, the third item was the encroachment from the adjacent property, which there was no evidence presented to show that in fact created an illegal condition in terms of either granting or not granting this lot line adjustment. And
Okay.
What was, if I may, Mr. Mayor, the first issue in terms of the frontage of the lot size, lot width, less than 100 feet? You said that the code applies to new subdivisions?
and parcel maps.
That was his
That was
And this is
That
not.
was your
That
interpretation.
was my
of what-
interpretation in reading it. In
Zoning
presenting it to the
administrator
board, the
agreed.
board then turned to the zoning administrator and asked the same question: is that a correct interpretation? And the answer we got back was yes, it was.
So in essence, none of the findings really make the lot illegal.
That's correct. None of
Some of the conditions applied.
Yeah, none of the problems submitted or presented by staff, in BZA's opinion, made it an illegal condition.
Right.
That's exactly right.
And then after that point in time, that's when staff discovered indeed it did affect it. That's their interpretation now,
Well,
that it is ministerial, has to be at least 100.
And that's an issue that I have, too.
City attorney's
Well, I've asked it
And I
so
have
many
an issue
times.
with that.
But it's, okay, they're doubting if the legal department is
lot
right.
width less than 100 feet, is that for new subdivisions and parcel maps, or does it apply to every property that's ever been built in the city of Glendale?
Mr. Mayor,
Comes to lot line adjustment.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Manukian, there's a couple issues here. One is that technically, under the definition of a subdivision, a lot line adjustment is a subdivision. So even though it's not a subdivision as we think of it in terms of creating new parcels, a lot line adjustment qualifies as a subdivision under both the Subdivision Map Act and our code. So I think technically that provision would
Was
require.
that interpretation given to the BZA when they asked about it?
That was not, but here's what was, and I don't think it was made clear. Here's what was provided, I think, to the BZA was that the zoning code, well, what's the exact section of this? The reference? Yeah, that
The reference?
incorporates for all, and let me pull it up for you.
Yeah, it's in the staff report.
30.02.020.
Yeah.
And
Provides that all permits issued under the code must comply with Chapter 16.
Part
So-
of this whole regulations started a while back when many cities found a million different excuses not to do lot line adjustments.
Did you finish reading that part of the code?
Sure, yeah, let me pull it up because I think it's 30.02.020A. The standards of Chapter 16.20 of this code shall be applicable to the design of lots and parcels of land when applying the provisions of this title, meaning Title 30 of the zoning code, and when considering any application for a procedure prescribed by this code. So I think it's always universally been applied by planning staff that any procedure, lot line adjustment, any type of
subdivision?
Yes, a lot line adjustment, a subdivision map, a CUP has to comply, the property has to comply with the standards that are set forth in 16.20, which include the 100-foot wide lot requirement.
Well,
And
I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you.
This is the first time I hear that the
Well,
lot line adjustment is a subdivision.
And I'll tell you why. A few years back, there was the same reasoning given by not just city, many cities. The state legislature passed a law which basically mandated, because before that, we had discretion whether to grant it or not grant it. Because of all these problems with this little lot line adjustments, the state legislature basically mandated to the cities that you have no discretion, you must grant them if there are less than 4 lots involved. Now, staff has figured out a different way and different interpretation of this thing. And I am pretty sure if somebody takes this, goes to the state level and get this to interpret it, I bet you anything they will probably say that what Mr. Devine is saying is more of an accurate statement. This is not a brand-new subdivision, in my mind.
And it's not.
And
it's not
it is
4 lots.
Well,
4 lots or less.
4 lots or less.
It is 4 lots or less.
Right.
If it's less than 4 lots,
Then you must approve.
you
it.
must
Yeah.
approve
Approve it if
Grant
it complies with all local building and zoning ordinances.
Come on.
Right.
I'm getting tired of this. I sat and I asked staff directly, legal, everything. They said it was ministerial, absolute denial. Now, if we're not in that court, then we better take it off calendar, go to the state and find out what it really means. Because I'm sitting here listening to a contractor and a CPA saying they don't agree with the legal department.
Well, wait,
So
no,
what
wait.
is-
I didn't say that.
So what
Now,
is
don't
it?
put words in my mouth. I said this is the first time I hear that a lot line adjustment is a subdivision.
Okay,
I mean, that's new to me.
okay, now you've heard
I
it.
did not say I disagree with the
Okay.
legal.
Okay, so
with
now
our
we've
legal
heard it.
advice.
First time I've heard it too.
Yeah, I mean that's
But
a
I didn't
surprise
ask
to me.
that
yeah.
question. I asked, is it ministerial or not? And legal has told me it's ministerial, you must deny.
You looking
Now, if
for a
that's
motion,
not
Mr.
true,
Mayor?
Well, Mr. Mayor, that is,
Well-
let me tell you, this is part of the reason we have issues with a lot of hillside lots.
yes, I know.
Because people try to come in, take a hillside lot that is less than 7,500 square feet, and the guy next door is 8,500 square feet or 10,000, and
let
they
me
like to do
borrow
a little
some.
lot line adjustment, and what happens is they run into this buzzsaw which says, you cannot do this. And I would feel comfortable if the staff would verify this information with the CHD. They're the ones who set all these
I
laws.
just said, are we going to take it off calendar?
I'll be more
Go
than
check
happy to
with
take it off the
state.
calendar, but I think we should straighten this out. This has major implications. Changing of the rules has even bigger implications than
Well,
this one item.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion from my colleagues on what they want to do. I'm not going to sit here all night debating with the legal staff that have told me point blank that it is ministerial and you have no option. Now, if the majority of you do not like that interpretation, and I do, then put a motion up and we'll send it to the state or whatever and get it straightened out. I don't care. Yes, Mr. Garcia.
Just wanted to kind of address that issue. A lot of this has to do with the interpretation of our local code, both Title 30 and the thing. So I don't know if there's any state agency that would take a request for an opinion. Even the Attorney General usually likes to issue opinions on matters of state concern, not how our own local code should be interpreted. There's the issue of the Subdivision Map Act, but it really has to do with our code and how we're applying it, and and frankly how we've applied it in the past since these provisions have taken effect. It's always been applied like this, and so there's no state body or authority that we can seek an opinion from.
Let me make my question clear, and I don't doubt what you're telling me. And
I don't mind the discussion.
I think, my decision will be based on what you're going to tell me. The lot line adjustment being a subdivision, is there any gray area in there, or is it your interpretation? Is it the Director of Planning's interpretation? Is it Mr. Krause's interpretation, or is it embedded in our code that the subdivision, a lot line adjustment is a subdivision? That's what I want to know.
That is my interpretation, and this is why I get there. The Subdivision Map Act and our code both define a subdivision as any division of land, and not just necessarily creating new parcels, but any division of land where you're transferring property from one to the other. And it used to be that any lot line adjustment, you could get a lot line adjustment for any number of parcels. It wasn't limited to the 4. And the way I read the MAP Act and our code, the MAP Act includes lot line adjustments. It just exempts them from the requirement of having to get a map. But that doesn't mean it's not a subdivision. It just expressly exempts them from the requirement of getting either a parcel map or a tentative map. So that's
your opinion.
That's my opinion. And frankly, aside from that technical explanation, or my opinion on the technical definition of subdivision, I think, again, our code, 1620 and 3002-020 together require that all lot line adjustments, any procedure prescribed by the code, must comply with Chapter 1620.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to move to deny the lot line adjustment, and I would ask them to come back with waiving of the fees after we deal with the ordinance.
We're talking about 9B1 and 4.
9B1, yes.
Is there a second?
And that ordinance, how many votes it would take?
It would take 4.
Well, I'll tell you, you don't have an ordinance because I'm going to vote against that.
Well, there's 4 others.
And he's going to vote against it. And I'll tell you, I have some issues with trying to fix one property. You change your rules, and you're going to have a havoc in your hand.
Well, the problem is our code interprets
Well,
lot
no,
line
it's his,
adjustment. Well,
his interpretation,
Well-
and there's a motion in here to approve.
Well, I'm not going to vote for an approval because it's against the law.
I would like to vote for an approval, but if
Well, I don't think
can't,
it is.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, you may. I want to go home tonight.
Michael, interpretation. Is there any room here for the city council to essentially anoint an interpretation of this code? I mean, you've done the research. You think this is the way the code reads. Is there any discretion on the part of the city council to come to a reasoned conclusion that's different than that would allow this to happen? To say that our code is our code, but we're going to interpret it as applying in the following manner. It only does relate to subdivisions.
I think we could say it only relates to subdivision. That wouldn't be an unreasonable interpretation. The problem I have is what's been set forth by Mr. Krausen as a staff report, and in my opinion, it's pretty clear that those 2 code sections read together require require that the resulting parcels comply with the minimum lot width requirement.
what do you mean? What do you mean set forth by Mr. Krause's staff report? Mr. Krause's staff report, it doesn't matter at this point. Your interpretation and your counsel is what's important.
Okay, and
I don't want to deal with Mr. Krause's or anyone else's staff report. I want your interpretation as to what we can and what we cannot do.
My interpretation,
not based on Mr. Krause's report.
What I meant to say was the information in the report, which, and I'll just say it again, those 2 code sections, I think,
with all due respect to Mr. Krause,
must be read together to require the minimum lot width be complied with on lot line adjustments. And I would add, just as a side, my interpretation is one issue, and how it's being interpreted. I also think that we put ourselves in an even tougher position going against something, our past practice, which we've uniformly applied across the board without exception.
But, that now you said another.
Well,
you're getting me confused. Past practice can always be changed because sometimes past practices are wrong. You said Mr. Krause's report. Mr. Krause's report is irrelevant at this point.
I understand that.
Past practice is irrelevant at this point. What the ordinance and what the code says and what we can and we cannot do legally.
Yeah. Well, I look at past practice as a legal issue too, Mr. Manukian, because a court looking at whether or not we are applying the code correctly will look to how we've interpreted and applied it in the past. And that's why I raised the issue, because I think that you can't, if it's...
But there's always room when there's an ordinance. It's either black and white, and past practice, there's always a gray area on the past practice, because it's basically a practice. It's not necessarily embedded in the code.
Well, in this case, I do think it's embedded. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. I think
don't
the code.
Say past practice.
I'm just trying to lay out all the reasons why I think that this is a ministerial act and that this lot line adjustment application doesn't comply with the code. I think the language in the code by itself mandates that this lot line adjustment be denied because it doesn't comply with minimum lot width.
And then what do we do? I mean, this gentleman has a problem. There's not enough votes on the council to change the ordinance. Where does he go then?
The option, again, that's already been put forth by staff, is the parcel map process. And again,
so he spends instead of spending $2,000, now he's got to go and spend $10,000, and he doesn't know what we're going to do.
The parcel map goes, yes, to the planning commission and is discretionary action. But again, it provides the mechanism to provide exceptions to this. And I understand it's a frustrating factual scenario.
I'm still going to ask
But I'll
staff-
tell you,
Legislation passed.
I am still going to ask staff to come back with a report on modifying that and any other things.
The ordinance.
Yeah. Still want to see it. Can be denied. It might be 3-2. I don't know.
Right.
Yes.
If I move 9B2,
I'll second that.
okay. I don't know what else to do at this point.
9B2, you said? Okay,
Yes.
second. Discussion.
There was a second.
There was a
there was a second.
Mr.
The answer for these folks lies outside of this chamber, lies outside of this building. Answer for these folks lies across the street. A Superior Court judge, through a stipulated judgment, through a lawsuit, can readjust property ownership, regardless of what we have to say or not. It's happened to me before. I've been on both sides, plaintiff and defendant. Option 1. Option 2, contractually, they can negotiate to create an easement permanently attached to the dominant tenement, as they call it. There are many options for these people. They're in the wrong arena. So I would be voting against 9B2, but their doors are open across the street.
Well, we have a consensus here. I can see that. Well, you made 2 motions so far. and you haven't got a
first
second on
motion
either one.
died.
9B2 is...
Well, no, it didn't die. There was a second.
No, my first motion was 9B1.
And it didn't get a second.
Yes, I did make that motion, however,
It wasn't seconded.
it wasn't seconded.
And 9B2
Was seconded.
was seconded.
Now, for this to pass, does it need 4 or 3 votes?
3 votes.
Okay, well, the lesser of all evils, 9B2, I'll go for that.
Well, I won't because it violates the law. So let's do a roll call.
I
did.
made the motion.
I-
Okay,
I made the motion. Don't point fingers, Mr. Youssef.
Council members.
3 of us will be going to jail.
I advise my colleagues to really consider what they're doing on this.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
He's washing his hands.
No.
Quintero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Weaver.
No, and I would like to see staff now tell us what kind of trouble we dug ourselves in. We set a precedent.
I'd like to move 9-4, 9B4. Initiating a code prohibiting appeals.
Is that the one you want, to prohibiting appeals of lot line adjustments,
No,
or
no.
to allow them where you're not
No,
increasing non-conformity?
I want the ordinance to come back to fix
Yeah.
what Mr.
That and
Weaver was
anything
saying.
else.
Yes,
Let staff
to fix our
investigate.
ordinance, because it's ridiculous.
And that's
You guys just fixed it.
B3.
No, we didn't.
That's B3, not
Set the
B4.
precedents.
Okay, what, B3 then? No, it's the motion is not in here. I just want staff to come back with changes in the code that will allow the lot line adjustment.
Yeah, 3.
Okay,
want 3?
9B3 then.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, so I can't. Okay, roll call on that.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
No.
Quintero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
No.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. Well, we beat that baby to death. Hey, what's next?
Move to adjourn.
Wait.
Is there any written communication or new business?
No,
Is there a motion to adjourn?
there is.
Yes.
Second.
We're adjourned 9:50.